Sophia was betrayed by her fiancé Crown Prince Raymond and her close friend Samantha, and now her entire family is dead. But when she opens her eyes, she discovers she's returned to the past. Before her engagement to Raymond, to save her family and avoid an engagement to the second prince, Sophia decides to make his older brother Alexis Crown Prince and avenge them both. But this path is fraught with danger. Tears simply blurred her vision, and she couldn't stop them. How stupid she was! Her parents had told her she shouldn't trust people like that. But these were the people closest to her fiancé and her friend, and she believed them. She did everything to make everyone comfortable in this situation. And to this day, Sophia felt that the Crown Prince and her best friend were the two closest and most loyal people to her. Samantha watched as the girl lay on the floor, bleeding and dying in pain. But she didn't care. She hated Sophia with all her heart because she had everything one could wish for, and it infuriated her. There wasn't a shred of compassion in Raymond's eyes either. On the contrary, he was glad that with Sophia's help, he had achieved the status of Crown Prince. But as long as her family survived, he couldn't fully develop his campaign. Therefore, they would all die. She, like her parents, had already played the role the Crown Prince needed. And now they were being discarded like old things. In other words, liquidated. And the girl couldn't do anything. They would simply kill her in cold blood, just like the rest of the family. How Sophia wished she had another chance and could turn back time. She would have found a way to change the situation so she could protect her loved ones and avenge all those who betrayed her. The girl suddenly woke up. If it weren't for the bright rays of light streaming through the window, she would have been asleep, and this nightmare would have continued for several more hours. But thank God it's over. There was a knock at the door, and the maid appeared. She apologized and said it was time to tidy herself up. The young lady's hair was very disheveled, and she looked, let's say, rather rumpled. Perhaps yes, she probably looks rumpled. And inside, she feels just as terrible. It's all because of that terrible nightmare. She urgently needs to get up and get herself back to normal. The girl asked the maid for a mirror, and when it was in her hands, she simply froze sitting up in bed. Something strange had happened. She began to look much younger and couldn't understand how it had happened. Anya's maid seemed to also see that all was not well with the young mistress, but she blamed it on the fact that she was not yet fully awake. Then Sophia suddenly asked what year it was. The maid replied that it was now the 11th month of the year, 549 of the Oakley era. This meant she had gone back 2 years. Now she was 17 years old again, and everything that had happened to her had been nothing but a nightmare. But she'd never had such a believable dream before, so she needed to double-check everything. It was all very realistic, and it seemed no one knew what would happen in 2 years, except Sophia. Annie decided her mistress was just fooling around, so she said she could fool around until evening, but only until evening, because then she had to get ready for the ball. And that was no laughing matter. What? A ball? Right, she was at that event 2 years ago and remembers it well, but she has absolutely no desire to go there a second time. Although she can certainly change some things about her future, she knows it. The maid said she'd prepare Sophia's outfit and help her get ready. She assured her mistress would look her best, and the girl breathed a sigh of relief. How good she was, her faithful Annie. It was Annie who stayed with her family when disaster struck and all the servants fled. This girl stayed with her until the end, until the Crown Prince and Samantha decided to deal with her and her family. She was even present the day those traitors broke into their home and started killing her family. Perhaps she was killed too. Perhaps she managed to hide or escape. I wonder what's happened to her now. For the sake of this faithful and kind-hearted maid, and for the sake of her family, she would put an end to all these outrages and restore justice. The girl never doubted this for a second, so we need to sort everything out. What information does she have? It's now clear that there are still 2 whole years left before her death. That means there's still time, and she'll be able to fully develop her plan for revenge. But then it dawned on her that she was about to be engaged to that damned Raymond. She was so stupid and naive that she didn't even realize that this union was beneficial to him so he could become Crown Prince. Reflecting further, the girl suddenly remembered that her father had arranged her engagement to Raymond, and if she didn't hurry now, she wouldn't be able to prevent a terrible tragedy later. This traitor and murderer will be proclaimed Crown Prince and heir to the throne of the empire if she doesn't change the future now. So she'll have to work hard after all the lives of her family and the state depend on her. To become Crown Prince in their country, one must be of royal blood and have the support of the nobility. Sophia Edelball's family was second in influence after the royal family. An engagement to second Prince Raymond Auckland is a mutually beneficial arrangement. With the support of the Duke's family, Raymond will undoubtedly become crown prince and subsequently gain the right of succession. In turn, the Edelball family, by making their beloved daughter the crown prince's wife, only strengthened their position in high society. But the fact is that the vile Raymond immediately killed all of Sophia's relatives upon becoming crown prince. As long as the Edelball family exists, this conman and murderer will never have true power. And this was the root cause of everything that had happened, which she now urgently needs to change. If she becomes his bride this time, then despite all the influence he has in society and at the imperial court, Raymond, no matter how he looks at it, will have to reckon with the famous Edelball family. Unable to accept this state of affairs, this scoundrel, having exploited Sophia's family to the fullest extent for his own ends, decided to immediately get rid of her and all her relatives. And he succeeded. This situation simply infuriated her. She rose from her chair and shouted at the whole house that she would never allow this to happen again. Now she would be the one in charge of this game called Cold Revenge, and she'll spare no effort in exacting revenge on yet another person. After all, it wasn't just Raymond who betrayed her. Samantha, their mutual friend, turned out to be a deceitful creature, and behind her back was plotting to kill Sophia. But where should she begin? It's too difficult and unsafe to act alone. The thing is, no one will believe her if she says she's been to the future and knows exactly what will happen in 2 years. Of course, she remembered one man, the first prince and heir to the empire, Alexis Oakland. This guy was completely different from the others, especially from that traitor Raymond. Alexis was the novel's unfortunate hero. He was Raymond's older brother, the firstborn of His Majesty. But because his mother was a common servant, he couldn't receive the same support as the second prince. Unlike Alexis's mother, Raymond's mother was born into the family of a famous and influential duke. And thanks to her connections, the aristocracy sided with the second prince. As a result, society close to the imperial palace always favored Raymond, and his mother, Alexis, however, was sent far from the capital to the most remote castle which belonged to the emperor. However, the young man studied hard and worked hard to improve himself. He was incredibly interested in military service. He soon became a renowned, experienced military general and earned the respect of the country's citizens. The first prince managed to gain significant support among the common people, and then the emperor began to doubt the future prince's candidacy. It was clear that Alexis was a much better choice for the role of heir. The vile Raymond realized the title could slip away from him in the near future and saw his brother as a true enemy. A plan to eliminate his dangerous rival began to form within him. It's clear that the second prince had the support of the entire aristocracy, but that wasn't enough, since Alexis had the support of the common people. Moreover, the first prince was far more powerful militarily. The proud Raymond couldn't stand this, so he arranged for the first prince to be sent to war. A few months later, he managed to end the war naturally with a victory for the kingdom of Oakland, but at the cost of his life, he died in the decisive battle. This is what led to Alexis being called the unlucky hero, but he's exactly the man she needs. With him, she could go up against Raymond and try to defeat him. But the trouble was, this valiant warrior was already dead. He had set out for war on the 16th day of the second month of the year, 549. But today is the 13th, which means he should still be alive. She didn't even notice how evening had arrived. Her maids were already looking for their mistress to prepare her for the ball. She had to shine and be the best because her position in society demanded it. The maids were excellent at their job, and within an hour, Sophia was completely ready for the ball. Her sky blue dress was stunning, and everything else was just as beautiful. Annie simply rolled her eyes. Her mistress was the most beautiful of them all. She asked permission to stand in a corner of the ballroom and observe her mistress. And if she needed anything, the maid would be there to help. Sophia knew she was about to find herself the center of attention, but she was completely prepared for it. After all, she'd experienced something similar once before, so she knew exactly how she would behave around certain people. As soon as the girl entered the room, all eyes were immediately on her, and understandably so, as she was accustomed to being constantly under the gaze of prying eyes. So she wasn't even worried. People looked at her the same way before. After all, at that time, everyone in the royal castle expected Sophia to become the future crown prince's bride. She behaved like a true lady and was held up as an example to other young women. But recently, the courtiers' gazes increasingly revealed nothing but hatred. Now it gives off a completely different impression. Even a little dull, it lacks that feeling. Raymond appeared right in front of her. He broke into a fake smile and gave her some trivial compliment about how beautiful she looked. She almost vomited at the perfect pretense. Of course, she expected the crown prince to arrive at the ball, but she didn't expect him to bump into her right at the start of the celebration. Previously, his words and smile had brought her joy and pleasure. Now she knew exactly what his smile meant, and that it didn't convey a shred of truth. This friendliness, interest, and light flirtation were simply a mask. And while she was naive, Raymond's plan worked perfectly. Raymond always maintained a friendly image to potential brides, but he did this solely to maintain his reputation, and it worked. But this time, she played it completely differently. She also gave the young man a false smile and said that compared to him, she looked like a gray mouse or a pale moth. She made it clear she wasn't going to melt at his words like she had the other times, but he wasn't a slouch either. He said he needed to keep an eye on his fiancée, otherwise she'd disappear or become a ghost. While other girls were dying of love for the prince, she openly hated him. And he's sorely mistaken if he thinks he can treat her as he pleases. This time, she won't allow it. If word gets out that she and Raymond are engaged, it will look as if her house is supporting the second prince and his candidacy for heir. Therefore, rejecting him now would be foolish. She shouldn't arouse public suspicion. After all, it was important to remember that if you underestimate someone, you'll end up looking like a fool. That's exactly what Sophia was like in the past. Let's say, at this stage of their relationship, he sees her as a naive fool. This mask suits her perfectly now. It will make it easier for her to carry out her plan for revenge. For now, she just needs to smile. And then a clear female voice was heard. Sophia wouldn't have mistaken it for anyone else but hers. Samantha burst into the room. She was a mutual friend of hers and Raymond's, a bright, eccentric, and always cheerful person. This cruel traitor will have to smile now, too. How she hates her, but now is not the time to sort things out. She must continue to play the role and be very vigilant so as not to slip up. She tried very hard not to hit the girl right in her pretty face and kept smiling. Then she asked why Samantha had just called Prince Raymond, and Samantha made a surprised face. She was a bad actress. Samantha began to wriggle out of it, saying that before Sophia arrived, Mr. Raymond had kindly agreed to keep her company earlier when she'd gone for a walk. She'd felt so lonely. The second prince also began to defend his accomplice. He said she actually looked very sad. That was the only reason Raymond decided to accompany Samantha. By making such remarks, the second prince hoped to embarrass Sophia by hinting at an inappropriate relationship between him and Samantha. He had said the same thing shortly before her elimination. At that time, she truly believed that there was nothing more to the two of them than friendship. How naive and trusting she had been behind her back. These killers were carrying out a terrible plan that would ultimately destroy Sophia's entire family. Suddenly, all the guests turned their attention to the arrival of the first prince. Some began whispering that a servant's son shouldn't attend such an event, but the young man paid no attention. Yes, Alexis Oakland entered the room, and he didn't care that everyone was talking about his appearance behind his back. He was calm and confident. That was exactly what Sophia needed. The game would begin today. Samantha and Raymond didn't fall behind the others. The girl made a face and said, how could they allow people in military uniforms to the ball? It was just weird and unpleasant. This was where decent people were having fun. Sophia appreciated the young man's impeccable appearance. She thought that for a soldier, a military uniform is a formal attire. This attire befits his status, and his outfit was simply magnificent. The girl needed to talk to Alexis face to face. They had much to discuss, but she needed to get rid of these two traitors. She needed to avoid their attention, because things might not go according to her plan. But while Sophia was pondering this, someone suddenly placed a hand on her shoulder. It was Samantha. The snake saw that the girl was lost in thought, and her face was very serious, so she decided to ask if everything was all right. The girl forced a smile. She couldn't think about the bad, or she'd give herself away. She had to keep her composure. She said she wasn't feeling well and wanted some privacy. So the girl told these sneaky friends she was going to the balcony for some fresh air. It was a perfect excuse to be alone. She needed a reason that wouldn't arouse suspicion. They were so good at pretending that she didn't even realize she was being so skillfully deceived. They did it flawlessly, pretending to be her best friends. Why was she so stupid? She couldn't immediately recognize that there was something between these two people beyond mere friendship. Before Sophia's death, Samantha made it clear that she was Raymond's lover. Then, in her prison cell, she asked her vile friend why she was doing this to her. After all, her family had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, her parents had been a great help to Raymond. But Samantha only laughed in response. What a pitiful sight seeing this darling of society behind bars. She's right, her family is innocent, but that's life. Her father's influence was simply exploited. That lying creature simply laughed in her face, and there wasn't a shred of compassion in her eyes. She'd mocked the girl in her final moments, and didn't regret it one bit, just like that damned Raymond. Looking into Sophia's eyes, Samantha said their plan had succeeded. They had smeared the girl's family and forged important documents to discredit her father. And now, Samantha would become crown princess in her place. It was all that damned envy. That's what led to this ending. Raymond envied his brother because he was the best at everything. Samantha, as it turned out, later envied Sophia and dreamed of being in her place. Sophia decided to ask how long she and Raymond had been hiding their secret relationship from her. She laughed again and explained that they'd been dating for a long time, their relationship beginning long before their engagement. That's how ordinary envy changes everything. It even changed the friendship between two girls. And why didn't Sophia notice anything earlier? Didn't pay attention to the fact that a plan to eliminate her was being hatched behind her back. But memories shouldn't get in the way, now. The mind must be clear and cool to plot revenge. Since their connection began before the engagement, they should be in a relationship now. But they're so cunning and cautious that they act like ordinary friends around her. They chat, joke around a lot, but casually exchange glances, trying to hide it from prying eyes. How much rot there was in their hearts. They always saw her as a naive fool, and nothing more. Although they're right, she really was like that before. But now a lot has changed, and in the future, everything will be different. At this point, Alexis, who was still in the room, turned abruptly and headed for the exit. He was fed up with all the stares, so he apologized and said he'd find another place. The girl realized she was losing her chance to speak with the first prince, so she ran to rectify the situation. She asked Alexis to wait a little longer and give her some time. They had to take advantage of this opportunity. Sophia said she had a very important conversation and dragged the prince onto the balcony. While no one was there, they would be able to talk quietly without witnesses. When Alexis looked at her, she began to doubt if this was the same man she'd only spoken to the first prince once, and that was in the distant past. Maybe she was mistaken, and this wasn't him, but there was no turning back. Her facial features seemed to be the same as they had been years ago. The guy finally asked what she wanted to talk to him about. He didn't know this girl, or maybe he just didn't remember. The girl apologized. It all happened quite spontaneously. Sophia introduced herself and said she was Duke Edelball's daughter, and that immediately changed the situation. Of course, the guy was well acquainted with that name. There was no time to waste. Someone could come out onto the balcony at any moment. So the girl told it straight out as it was. The prince shouldn't participate in the planned war. Otherwise, he wouldn't come back. It turned out that this young man had a disposition quite different from the rest of the imperial family. He was a true warrior, brave and forthright. Naturally, he didn't believe her and asked where she got this information. What could Sophia say? He wouldn't believe she'd risen from the dead and returned to the past 2 years earlier. She simply said it was a trap specifically designed to kill the prince. As expected, the guy demanded proof. But Sophia had none. He still didn't believe her, and she begged him to just take her word for it. She had no reason to deceive him, so that's all she has. The guy was slightly irritated and disappointed. Naturally, even if she told him what would happen in 2 years, he wouldn't believe it either. He was seeing her only once in his life. Sophia said she understood him perfectly and understood why he doubted her words. Perhaps he believed the girl was trying to deceive him, but he needed to know about her upcoming engagement. The girl tried to explain that he should still believe her words. After all, they had the same goal. She would help Alexis become the heir and receive the title of Crown Prince. The best option was to combine their powers. It was clear the young man was slightly confused. He understood that Raymond as an opponent was very strong and had the support of the nobility. Therefore, he desperately needed allies interested in his victory. So Alexis decided to listen to the girl, and she told him she knew exactly what would happen in 2 years. He would go to war, his army would win, but the prince himself would die on the battlefield. She's also 100% certain that Alexis is being framed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent the heir to the throne to such a brutal death. But the guy asked how she knew all this. She definitely shouldn't tell the guy where she got the information. No one would believe her that she came from the past. So she said she overheard Raymond's conversation by accident. Sophia remembers her last conversation with this traitor. Well, he was so pleased that he was taking the life of the one who had helped him become crown prince. He had removed this obstacle from his path, just as he had removed Alexis. On that fateful evening, when Raymond and Samantha decided to kill her, they didn't hide the truth. She and the first prince were truly an obstacle to Raymond's rise to power. They were always an eyesore and a source of impotence with their behavior. That damn son of a filthy servant always outdid Raymond. And that was what infuriated the traitor most of all. What if the emperor decided Alexis was a better candidate for the role of crown prince? He couldn't allow that. He did everything he could to remove this powerful rival from his path. After all, he was the one who was supposed to be appointed crown prince. Everything could have been done much more quietly, but this idiot was itching to fight. This scoundrel had connections everywhere, even during the war. So he tried to arrange everything so that his brother simply wouldn't return from the war. He was killed on his beloved battlefield. Sophia recalled scenes from the past and couldn't believe her memory. Could Raymond really be so dangerous and cruel? Why hadn't she seen this before? Why hadn't she figured out which of the brothers was worthy of the throne? After all, this man was more terrible than the devil himself. Only in her final moments before the second prince was about to kill her did she realize she had made a grave mistake. And that mistake cost the lives of not only her, but her entire family. Now, the girl's main task is to convince the prince of her words and prevent a terrible disaster. Now that it's known how Raymond killed Alexis, his words are not a lie. The girl told the first prince that Raymond was planning to arrange his death on the battlefield in the coming war. The people he trusted would betray him at the most crucial moment, so he must be extremely vigilant and attentive to prevent his own death. Alexis seemed unprepared for such information. He's a seasoned professional soldier and understands people. He trusts his subordinates, so he doesn't understand which of them might turn out to be a traitor. Sophia begged the first prince to listen to her words. She knew they sounded strange, but they were true. He should be wary of one man, a traitor working for Raymond. Alexis thought it was a stupid question, but he still asked one: who on his team was the traitor? The only answer he got was 2 words: Barry Jen. This man was his right-hand man. The first prince's eyes flashed with rage. He was simply perplexed that the man with whom he had fought so many wars, the one he had trusted with absolutely everything, could turn out to be a traitor. This was utter nonsense. Sophia continued trying to convince Alexis of the truth of her words. It turns out Raymond is holding Barry's younger sister hostage. Therefore, his hands are tied, and he follows the crown prince's every order to rescue the girl. Of course, this information changes everything. Alexis knew how much his friend loved his sister. He had become her mother and father, who had long since died. So it's hard to even blame the guy for cheatings. Alexis seemed to be beginning to grasp the gravity of the situation. He said he would definitely save Barry's sister. He just needed to know where she was, but everything had to be done carefully, discreetly, and without committing any crimes. Sophia fully supported his idea and said she would help him in any way she could. She also knew that the girl was locked in a warehouse in the eastern part of the royal castle. Alexis was silent for a moment, then said that in order for them to trust each other, he wanted the girl to do something. Well, what should she do? Why didn't he trust her anyway? If the boy saves his friend's sister, he'll realize Sophia was telling the truth, and then she'll be able to gain his complete trust. And that's the first step toward revenge. The prince pondered his thoughts for a long time, unsure how to voice his request. After a brief pause, he said he wanted the girl to go with him to search for Barry's sister. In principle, this was perfectly logical. After all, if the girl refused, the prince might think it was a trap or some kind of deception. But if Sophia went with him, It would mean he trusted her completely. Alexis was far from simple. He wasn't used to trusting just anyone, especially beautiful girls. So he said that if a girl was serious, she'd be sure to prove it with her actions. Sophia understood perfectly well that in her situation, she had nothing to lose. Alexis was a strong and reliable partner, and wasting such an opportunity would be foolish. So she should agree and set out to find the girl. On the other hand, Sophia understood that if she went to rescue Barry Jen's sister now, she would put herself in danger, but in doing so, she would prove she hadn't lied and easily win the first prince's trust. Thus, she would kill two birds with one stone, to avoid an engagement to Raymond and at the same time make Alexis crown prince as quickly as possible. She would have to win his trust first, no matter what. So she suggested they set out to find him right away. Since the man was a career soldier, he immediately assumed the warehouse would likely be guarded by Raymond's subordinates. Going up against them barehanded would be foolish. He needed to develop a plan and prepare first. Sophia noted that they had no weapons, and that getting one would be difficult right now. But Alexis showed her his sword. He'd even brought it to the ball. He didn't need any other weapon. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. This man could go into battle and on reconnaissance missions with her traitor. Raymond was very presumptuous, allowing the war hero to keep his sword. The young people set off immediately. They left the palace unnoticed and called a carriage. Neither of them cared that it was the middle of the night. The journey was long, and an uncomfortable silence fell over the carriage. Sophia simply watched the young man, unable to tell whether he was relaxed or intensely focused. Either way, he was very handsome. Raymond was also attractive, but Alexis's beauty was quite different. This young man was charismatic, and his features expressed nobility and calm. Raymond was also a liar, and his smile was never genuine. Alexis rarely smiled at all, and because he was a military man, you wanted to rely on him and trust him completely. We reached the far warehouse in the early morning. As Alexis had said, the entrance was guarded. If a patrol spotted them, I'd be able to save the girl. So Alexis took Sophia's hand and pulled her deeper into the garden. He was sure there was another way in. Secret rooms always had two entrances. Now they had to find the second one. The young men walked around the room to the other side. There was indeed another door, and a guard stood next to it. Barry's sister was definitely here. Otherwise, why would 3 guards be guarding an abandoned building? Their main task now is to sneak inside undetected and ensure that the girl is being held here. A clear plan of action is needed to ensure everything goes smoothly. But the young prince had a completely different opinion. He decided not to make any plans or strategies, but simply to go straight ahead. This principle always worked and produced the desired results. The guards suspected nothing. Besides, it was unlikely anyone would be strolling around in such a forgotten place, especially at night. So the guards were completely calm and relaxed when they were attacked. Less than 5 minutes later, the guards were already lying on the ground, unable to rise. Sophia noticed that the prince had more than enough strength. With him, it was truly not scary to go into the most dangerous battle. That's why the army led by First Prince Alexis always won every battle. And now it's clear why he's so beloved by the common people of the country. He's a true hero. When the young men were sure there were no more of Raymond's men nearby, they headed for the door leading inside. The young man easily dealt with the huge lock and pushed the door open. In the far corner, they saw a silhouette. As they got closer, they realized it was a young girl. She looked completely exhausted, and her mouth was covered with some kind of cloth. Without wasting a second, Sophia ran up to the poor girl and asked if Barry Jen was her brother. She nodded, and the girl quickly began untying the ropes around her wrists to free her. The girl cried and said she was Amy Barry's sister. Some people had kidnapped her, brought her here, bound her, and gagged her. She'd been here for several days now, begging these young men to save her. Sophia began to untangle the ropes faster. They might have very little time. They needed to get away from here as quickly as possible to remain unnoticed. After all, the sun would rise soon. The young people arrived at the palace only in the early morning. The military wing was still awake. Barry met them and froze in the doorway, seeing his commander and 2 girls next to him, one of whom was his missing sister. The boy couldn't see anything else. His eyes blurred with tears. He rushed forward and hugged the girl tightly. She was crying too. She had been through so much, but now they were together again. Barry fell to his knees. He was still crying, but now out of gratitude and shame for trying to betray his boss. He couldn't be forgiven, but if it hadn't been his own sister, this wouldn't have happened. Alexis asked his friend to stop crying. They would talk later, and their conversation would be very long and difficult. But right now, he really needed to finish with Sophia. She had the information, and she was right. When the young men stepped aside, the first prince bowed to the girl and thanked her. He was unharmed today, and it was entirely thanks to her. Therefore, they must continue. This meant only one thing. The boy had begun to believe what Sophia was telling him, so she reminded him once again that she had been completely serious when she said she wanted to make Alexis crown prince. The girl said she operated on the principle, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Therefore, to become crown prince, the boy must listen to her carefully. He must marry her immediately. To bring her plan to fruition, the young couple must marry. This will not be frowned upon by society, as they are both from influential families. Then, her father will ensure that Alexis becomes heir to the throne. Of course, the prince liked Sophia from the very first sight, but how was he supposed to interpret all this? Just a moment ago, he was certain he would never marry and would dedicate his entire life to military service. The girl tried to convince the young man marriage to her was a sure path to becoming crown prince. The Edelball family were dukes. They were the oldest and one of the most influential in the empire. Her father is a well-known figure in the country, and one word from him would be enough for the emperor to change his mind and appoint Alexis as crown prince, for he is worthy of it. Raymond understood that even dead his brother could cause him trouble, so he decided to marry Duke Edelball's daughter. This would certainly silence Alexis's supporters. Back then, Sophia had no idea that her relationship with Raymond wasn't about love. There was no such feeling there at all. It was a cold calculation on the part of the second prince. By marrying the daughter of an influential duke, he acquired the long-desired title and through deception inherited the honorable right to ascend the imperial throne as crown prince. With his final touch, Raymond slandered the noble Edelball family. The ducal family was no longer useful to him, so he ordered the execution of all its members, including his new wife. Alexis thought for a moment. Well, let's say the girl succeeds in making him crown prince. What would she gain from that, and why would she want to do it? As far as he knew, Sophia was soon to be engaged to Raymond, but it was clear the young duchess was more than determined. She said she would never allow Raymond to become crown prince. She didn't want him to be heir to the throne. Yes, she must become engaged to the second prince. But that hasn't happened yet, and there's still time to change everything. After all, once the engagement is over, annulling the future marriage will be extremely difficult. Still, Alexis couldn't understand why his brother's fiancée was carrying out such a plan behind his back. And why was she helping him? What was the benefit? Raymond seemed quite friendly with her. Yes, he displayed politeness, even feigned affection. But all this was only for the sake of obtaining the status of crown prince. He had to constantly smile and swear eternal devotion. Sophia never felt love for him, perhaps a slight sympathy, since the prince was polite and very sweet when they met. She thought they could have a good life together. But as it turned out, later, Raymond had betrayed her long before announcing their engagement. He got along well with Sophia in public and then fled to his mistress Samantha. He's so cruel that he didn't even blink when he murdered her entire family. Sophia knows what Raymond really is. His politeness was just a mask. But one day, his inner demon will burst forth. That's how things really are. This traitor will show his fangs again, and she doesn't want to be used a second time. Besides, Raymond doesn't have the qualities to be an heir. The first prince understood perfectly well that his brother was completely unsuitable as heir. But did Sophia really see in him, Alexis, all the character traits a crown prince should possess? The girl replied that she was confident he would be an excellent ruler in the future. The people would follow him because they trusted him. When he died in the war, the country's residents mourned for a long time. Sophia had no doubt that Alexis had already earned sufficient authority in society through his actions. Therefore, he would be supported by the majority of the empire's population, and she would facilitate this. But Alexis said that no matter how you look at it, an engagement to Raymond would be more beneficial to Sophia's family. Her parents would never agree to her marrying a military man, so they had to play it safe. The first principal stated that as a reward for victory in a difficult war, he would ask the emperor for the right to betroth Sophia. If he won, his request would stand. Indeed, this would surely work. In a situation like this, even the emperor wouldn't be able to refuse Alexis. How clever he is, this first prince. The girl's spirits even lifted. Now she wouldn't be fighting Raymond alone. It turned out her ally was very resourceful, smart, and most importantly, brave. Since it was already quite late, the first principal ordered a carriage to be brought. Sophia's family must be very worried about her. The young couple agreed to discuss the matter at their next meeting. But Alexis had one last question. He asked the girl why she was so certain that the first prince wanted to become the heir to the empire. She didn't know him at all and had only seen him once, and that was when she was a child. Sophia responded immediately. She was certain that for Alexis, who had always remained in the shadows, this unexpected decision to go to war meant that he had not yet given up on his hope of becoming crown prince. The boy looked the girl straight in the eye again. It turned out that girls from rich and influential families could be very smart and insightful. He had never heard such words in his entire life. Well, the girl objected. She said she'd been going with the flow her entire life. She'd never doubted her influential father's decisions or the way she'd lived her life. Everything seemed to be going her way. She trusted the opinions of others and never asked unnecessary questions. That's precisely why Raymond managed to deceive her so easily. Frankly, she herself didn't really understand how she became the bride of this deceiver. But that was her past life. Perhaps a higher power is giving her another chance to change everything, and she will definitely do it with or without Alexis's help. Arriving home, Sophia decided to sit in the living room for a while longer. She needed to reflect and sort out the thoughts in her head. But suddenly, she heard footsteps. Her father, Duke Edelball, entered the room. The Duke asked the butler to leave her alone with her daughter. They needed to talk for a while privately. The man nodded, apologized, and quietly left the room. Her father asked the girl to follow him, and she obediently obeyed. For her and Alexis to follow through on their plan, her father needed to be on their side. Otherwise, if they failed, it would all be over. The Duke seemed to be in a bad mood. He asked why his daughter had left the ball without permission. He asked the girl to explain why she had done so. Not only her family, but even the servants were worried about her. Now, Sophia would have to wriggle out of it and come up with a plausible explanation. She bowed her head and asked for forgiveness. Thank God the Duke loved his daughter very much, so she could count on him not being angry for long. The Duke still frowned, reminding his daughter that she was engaged to His Highness Raymond. Incidentally, the prince was also worried and had been searching for her for a long time. Well, Sophia was sure her fiancé couldn't care less. After she disappeared, he immediately contacted her father. Nothing escapes his notice. It was now or never. The girl decided to take action. She told her father that she was grateful for everything he did for her, but she had one very big request that only her beloved daddy could fulfill. The Duke immediately sensed something was wrong. His daughter was acting strangely. Sophia rarely asked him for anything, so the conversation was likely to be very serious. He asked her what she wanted. Sophia said the conversation concerned her recent engagement to His Highness Prince Raymond. She was asking her father for help in dissolving this union. She had no one else to turn to. Only he could help. The Duke felt like he'd misheard something, or maybe his daughter had simply gone mad. How could she even say such a thing? After all, it had already been decided. She would become Raymond's wife. But the girl wasn't about to back down. She said she categorically refused to marry His Highness the Second Prince. She considered him unsuitable for the role of crown prince. Raymond is a completely unsuitable candidate to be heir to the empire. She is convinced of this and considers the prince a hypocritical deceiver. She doesn't think it will be possible to find someone who will accept this status, but it certainly shouldn't be Raymond. Behind the mask of good nature lies a completely different personality. The second prince's words and actions should not be trusted, and her father, as an experienced politician, should see and understand this. In a sense, Duke Edelball agreed with his daughter. He suspected the prince had his own hidden agenda, and his daughter was a bargaining chip. But who then would be suitable as heir to the empire? Sophia paused dramatically, then replied that she believed First Prince Alexis was ideal for the role. He had already proven his loyalty to the people by participating in numerous wars. It seemed the father hadn't expected to hear that name from his daughter's lips. Why this man? He had numerous enemies throughout the country, and even in the imperial palace. His authority is a hindrance to many. Besides, this guy doesn't have a respectable position in high society since his mother is a common servant. Although it's all just a formality, Sophia decided to remind her father that Alexis was fighting for his country and doing a very good job. Moreover, the boy was respected by both the emperor and the common people. So why is such a brave and responsible commander as Alexis unworthy of being crown prince? He is an excellent candidate, and the Duke understands this perfectly well. He just doesn't want to admit it. Ethelbald paused. It turned out his daughter was very perceptive and intelligent. But on the other hand, an engagement to an aristocrat would bring great benefits to their family. And he didn't yet know what to do in this situation. Sophia quickly understood her father's line of thought, so she continued to say that if His Highness Alexis became crown prince, their family would benefit no less. The father nodded, but countered that Raymond also had very strong support. He too had supporters, and they were far more influential than the ordinary citizens who supported Alexis. Sophia objected. True, His Highness has no allies among the aristocracy. However, their family could provide him with assistance and side with him. For the Ethelbald family, this would be a priceless treasure. The man understood that first Prince Alexis valued humanity and justice. He was truly trustworthy, and there was no arguing with his daughter on that. Besides, Raymond had tried to kill his brother. Sophia also told me that a couple of hours ago, she had gotten into an argument with His Highness Alexis. The younger sister of his subordinate was taken hostage by Raymond. He wanted to set the subordinate against his brother, and if her father doesn't believe her, then she will bring witnesses. Alexis's deputy Barry, his sister, and also the first prince himself. Sophia decided to tell the truth. She had run away from the ball to meet Alexis, and together with His Highness, go to rescue the poor girl. Otherwise, she might have died there. The Duke seemed shocked by the situation. He asked if Sophia was injured, as he couldn't just put himself in danger. She was a famous person, after all, the crown prince's fiancée. Sophia apologized again, but she managed to prove that Prince Raymond was a man who would even kill his own brother to achieve his goals. Duke Ethelbald was a very wise man. He understood that if the family entered into an alliance with such a man, they could suffer the same tragic fate. Therefore, they should think carefully. Sophia had great hope that her father would be wise enough to make the right decision. After all, Alexis was truly much more suited to the role of crown prince. The Duke didn't think long. After some deliberation, he agreed. However, he had to think carefully about what to do with the engagement. He would worry about that a little later. It was already very late, and he needed to go to bed. The girl stepped out into the hallway, a satisfied smile on her face. She knew her father wouldn't let her down, as he was personally interested in his daughter's happiness. If she couldn't convince him, all their plans would come to an end. Even if Alexis had petitioned the emperor, presenting him with his achievements in service, without receiving the Duke's consent, he would hardly have been able to secure approval for the engagement. Of course, the Duke would have reluctantly allowed her to marry Raymond, but raised among aristocrats, he always attaches great importance to the interests of his family. Although my father is a very strict man, he always thinks about what's best for him and his family. So now he's making some very important but difficult decisions. This time, he might have a hard time forgiving his daughter for turning down her engagement to Raymond. But as it turns out, he respects Sophia and her opinion. Apparently, the Duke, having carefully considered everything, would want to conclude the engagement. And after Alexis returned from the war, he and Sophia would become engaged. This plan suited everyone. The next morning, Ani knocked on her mistress's door and announced that she had received a letter. Oddly enough, she hadn't expected any letter and had no idea who had sent it. Raymond must have already heard that Barry's sister Amy was rescued. Before the fighting began, Alexis decided to arrive on the battlefield early, but his assistant and trusted friend were already waiting for him there. Bear once again thanked the prince from the bottom of his heart for saving his sister. He hadn't expected such a gesture from his superior. The man was deeply ashamed of his actions. After all, they were more than friends, and Barry had betrayed his boss, but he couldn't act differently. His sister's life was at stake. Alexis calmed the boy down, saying he wasn't going to punish him for what he did. He understood that Barry had been forced to do it. Besides, he was a good soldier, and his experience would be useful on the battlefield. Barry fell to one knee and swore on his life that from that moment on, he would serve Alexis faithfully and truly, and never disgrace his status as the commander's right hand. It was Alexis who sent Sophia the letter. He informed her that he was leaving for the battlefield that morning, but he hadn't forgotten their conversation the previous day, and everything they agreed on remained in effect. That was very kind of the man, may luck be with him, for he's doing what he's supposed to. Sophia also has some unfinished business. She called her maid again and said she had a big favor to ask of the girl. She was the one who could help her with this matter. Anya was ready to fulfill any order her mistress gave her. Sophia leaned into her maid's ear and told her that she and His Highness Prince Alexis had become engaged. The maid was to tell this to the people Sophia would name. The girl is supposed to share this information as if it were a secret and ask not to reveal it to anyone. This information hasn't been made public yet. The maid simply overheard it. Sophia had confidence in her maid. This girl had never let her down before, so she would do everything as her mistress desired this time too. So far, everything was going according to plan. Sophia's plan was to find the spy working for Raymond. The second prince, being engaged to her, knew suspiciously much about the Edelbald ducal family. This is only possible if someone from the duke's household is passing the necessary information to Prince Raymond, so she needs to find out who that person is. By evening, Anya ran into Sophia's room and announced that His Majesty Prince Raymond had arrived. It all happened much sooner than she had imagined. Raymond settled into the living room and waited for his new bride. It was clear the man was very nervous. All his plans seem to be starting to break down, and we need to figure out how Sophia is involved in this. The young duchess came out to the prince in all her glory. She greeted him plastered on a practiced smile and said she was very glad to see Raymond in her home. The prince could have won the hypocrisy contest. He smiled broadly and asked the girl not to act so formal, as they were very close and longtime friends. The girl decided not to put on an act, so she immediately asked why the prince had come to the duke's house. He replied that he had heard some unpleasant rumors. It turned out Raymond had overheard Sophia's engagement to his brother Alexis. The girl nodded, realizing the maid had fulfilled her request perfectly. The news spread. Even in the mansion, no one learned anything for 2 days. This means the information easily leaked out. In other words, among the few people Ani communicated with, there was a spy. Sophia's face was completely emotionless, making it difficult for the prince to discern what she was thinking. But she asked him if he had heard any other news. Raymond said there was no more important news. But by the way, he also heard that Prince Alexis saved her from an attack by hooligans, but that was probably just rumor. Sophia smiled slightly. So Raymond's men, who held Barry's sister in the warehouse, were in his opinion just hooligans. He's trying to get out of this mess unscathed, Sophia asked with a grin. Well, that worries Raymond, since they're supposed to be engaged soon. Rumors shouldn't ruin their perfect relationship, and especially the prince's reputation. The man perked up, meaning everything was going according to plan, and he would soon be appointed crown prince of the empire. So he suggested they get engaged right away and not wait. Well, the girl objected. These are very difficult times. The war has begun. Getting engaged at such a time isn't the best idea. It would be better to get engaged after the war's over. The prince had nothing more to do in the duke's house. He politely bid his bride farewell and headed to his carriage. Sophia thus bought herself a little time. Only now did the young duchess realize that Raymond was very easy to deceive. He was stupid and naive, and not even worth a damn to Alexis. She deeply regretted that her father had been absent during her conversation with Raymond. After all, she had been so close to uncovering the truth. Oh well, let the deceiver enjoy his happiness while he could. Thanks to Raymond, the girl was finally able to uncover the spy. Ani was asked to deliver messages to specific people, but each of these people received different information. Annie told the head maid that at the party, first Prince Alexis had very openly courted Madame Sophia, and it seemed her mistress wasn't at all averse to flirting with a man. Chef Jeff learned that Prince Alexis had suggested Sophia meet in a casual setting. After all, they rarely see each other, so it would be wonderful and pleasant to chat privately. But Ani told the palace that the brave Prince Alexis had saved her mistress from the hooligans who had attacked her in the garden that evening during the ball. And now everything fell into place. Butler Lauren was a spy. He knew the Duke's house well and could easily be used to lure the Edelbald family into a trap. It was because of this man that Sophia's entire family was murdered. Before her death, the Edelbald family was accused of committing the crime, and irrefutable evidence was found in the house in the form of previously missing documents. So this whole thing is the work of Laurent the butler. He's a vile traitor, and Sophia will never forgive him. She will definitely take revenge on this villain, and it will be very cruel. But despite knowing the truth, more evidence was needed to accuse Lauren of espionage. To obtain it, she headed straight to her father's office. The young woman asked the Duke to call a handwriting expert, which perplexed the man. Why would his daughter need such a specialist, and whose handwriting did she want to examine? There were many papers in the Duke's desk, and the expert will have to find out whether they were all signed by Mr. Edible's hand or whether someone else did it. When the expert arrived at the office, the girl presented him with a pile of documents and asked him to look at them. She also requested that Lauren be present during the inspection. One of the documents contained information about Duke Edible organizing rebellions in neighboring states. The man was shocked. Not only had he never signed such a document, but he hadn't even seen it. These documents testified to terrible crimes. Someone had broken into the Duke's office, pretended to be Sophia's father, and planted these letters. And now, the girl, with the help of an expert, offered to find out whose hand this was. After all, she was absolutely certain of her father's innocence. She said she had an idea who exactly forged her father's signatures. But all of this needed to be officially proven, which is exactly what she was about to do now. The handwriting on all the documents was very similar. Incidentally, it was almost identical to Lauren's. And a few minutes later, the expert confirmed the girl's suspicion Lauren had indeed signed the papers. The expert asked Laurent to write a few lines and compared his handwriting with the handwriting on the documents. There were almost no differences. These papers were written by the butler. He was the spy. Lauren fell to his knees and began to cry. He begged for forgiveness, saying he was simply infatuated with money. He couldn't refuse. The temptation was too great. Sophia seemed no longer surprised by the butler's words. She asked if Raymond had offered him money to forge these documents. She was no longer in doubt about the answer. As expected, the butler revealed that the first prince Raymond had, by hook or by crook, persuaded the man to forge documents and put the Duke's signature on them. The Duke seemed furious. He said he'd send the butler to prison until he died. But even that wouldn't be enough for what this traitor had done. Neither the money Laurent received from Raymond for his work, nor Raymond himself, helped this foolish and greedy man gain the Duke's forgiveness. He was sent to prison. After what happened, the Duke wanted some time alone to sort everything out in his head. What if he hadn't learned of his butler's betrayal? What would have happened if the documents had been made public? If people had learned the contents of the documents, there would have been an uprising, and the Edible family would have been executed. That's exactly what happened in the girl's past life. Her family was killed. Finally, Sophia helped her father open his eyes and see the reality of the situation. After all, he trusted Raymond, but it turned out he was simply using the Duke's power and reputation for his own ends. Sophia left behind the secret papers. She thought a handwriting expert might be able to decipher them in case they were needed to corner Raymond. The man was proud of his daughter. Now he sees how wrong he was about the second prince. And now it will be easier to fight him, because his daughter and Alexis will help him. He is no longer alone. Even in a soft bed, the girl couldn't sleep. Difficult thoughts wouldn't leave her head. What if she hadn't realized Lauren was a spy? What would have happened then? The girl's morning didn't start with coffee. She heard strange noises and screams in the living room and decided to immediately find out what was going on downstairs. What could be happening so early in the morning? Anya's poor maid stood on the threshold. She was trying to close the door and keep someone out of their home. But Sophia couldn't yet discern who this unwelcome guest was. The girl called out to the maid and asked what was going on. Finally, she saw who was standing in the doorway. It was Samantha, and she was furious. Her face was contorted with anger. From the very threshold seeing Sophia, Samantha started screaming, asking what the hell was going on here and why wasn't this stupid maid letting her in? Had she lost her nerve and didn't know who she was? It's probably too early to tell that bitch that Sophia already knows she's a traitor, and they won't be friends like they used to be. And there was no friendship before. This is all a farce and a means of self-interest on Samantha's part. So Sophia decided to put on a forced smile and pretend everything was fine. He could get the information he needed from Samantha. She said everything was fine. The maid just had orders from her father. The girl explained that the engagement was soon to take place, and preparations for the celebration were in full swing in the house. Therefore, the Duke didn't want strangers wandering around the mansion, that's all. Samantha stood there, unsure what to say. Ah, so the engagement was going to happen after all. That was good. It meant Raymond's plan was working, and he'd soon be crown prince. She needed to keep playing the friend. Sophia then apologized to Samantha, but said she had absolutely no time to chat with her friend. She was busy preparing for her engagement and waiting for her tailor and hairdresser. The young Duchess had always been taught to be honest and not to lie. But this couldn't be called a lie because the engagement would still take place. However, her chosen one would not be Raymond, but Prince Alexis. Samantha hadn't expected this turn of events. She was used to Sophia being a sweet and well-behaved girl, always willing to listen to her and Raymond. But what had happened now? The guest began to complain out loud. How could this be? Surely her best friend couldn't find a moment to have a cup of tea with her and share the latest news from her life. Sophia apologized again and said she was truly very busy and would do it some other time. She understood that Raymond had sent her to the Duke's house. This vixen would be able to assess the situation and extract the necessary information. The next moment, the girl asked the servant to take her guest out of the living room. She simply couldn't talk to this traitor any longer. She was tired of pretending. Unsurprisingly, Samantha was shocked and didn't say another word. The young Duchess's behavior was strikingly different from her previous behavior. She had been easy to manipulate before. Samantha had always managed to manipulate her friend before. And no matter how busy she was, she always found time to talk about her relationship with Raymond and the circumstances of the Duke's household. Today, however, Sophia behaved completely differently, leaving Samantha stunned. She's probably wondering if the young Duchess has uncovered her and Raymond's plans and secret relationship. Now, Sophia was more than serious. She was no longer the little girl who trusted everyone. This time, she would make them fear their own shadows, and they would long remember who Duchess Edelball was. Having sent Samantha away, the girl decided to really get down to business and prepare for the engagement. As soon as Alexis returned from the war, they would be engaged, so she needed to hurry and prepare everything necessary for the celebration and beyond. The girl called her maid and asked her to find her a self-defense instructor. She hadn't seen the need for one before, but the time had come to be prepared for anything. Of course, the mistress's request greatly surprised the young maid. Who is Mistress Sophia afraid of? She is a veritable angel. Why does she need a self-defense teacher? Who is she planning to defend herself against? This decision didn't come to the young Duchess suddenly. When she and Alexis set out to rescue the girl, Amy, from captivity, she proved completely useless. She knew neither how to attack nor defend herself. All was quiet in the imperial palace. Raymond paced nervously in his office, eagerly awaiting Samantha's return. She would bring fresh news from Count Edelball's estate. It didn't take long, but when Samantha told him how her best friend had greeted her, Raymond was truly furious. How could this silly girl behave like that? She'd never behaved like that before. Samantha angrily announced that she had no idea what had gotten into Sophia. The girl cited engagement preparations and threw her friend out. But what kind of nonsense is this? He's known the Duchess for years. She couldn't have done that to her friend, Samantha. Sophia practically idolized this girl. So why did she have no qualms about sending her away this time? Raymond couldn't figure out when things started getting out of control. Something was wrong. Why was Sophia so nice to him, but so rudely kicked her friend out of the house? He suspected she'd exposed them. On the other hand, it's too early to jump to such conclusions. Perhaps Sophia really is busy preparing for her engagement. But if they show up at her place again, suspicions are certain. They need to call Laurent and ask him everything. Every day at midnight, Lauren contacted Raymond, but suddenly his messages stopped coming. The prince also received no response to his messages to the butler, so something had definitely happened. Samantha suggested they focus less on Lauren. Until they were absolutely sure their plan hadn't been discovered, they needed to be more cautious. Lauren could take care of himself. The prince was also incredibly infuriated by the fact that someone had saved Barry's sister. And as luck would have it, Alexis found out about it. But he wondered how this thought haunted Raymond, and he was simply furious. He spent so much effort and money to ensure Alexis never learned anything about Barry's sister. And Barry himself was supposed to keep a secret from anyone about his sister's kidnapping. But even here, things didn't go according to plan. For the first time, even Samantha didn't know how to calm the prince down. He was in genuine despair, and that was very bad. They'd gotten a little carried away, and now we needed to try and fix the situation quickly. The girl smiled and said that Raymond needed a break. Besides, there was no point in worrying about the past, which couldn't be changed. They needed to think about the future. They needed to come up with a new plan, one that was clearer and more effective. A few days later, the maid Anya brought a young man to the Duke's house and introduced him to Sophia as a self-defense instructor. This girl carried out all her mistress's instructions with lightning speed. Imagine Sophia's surprise when she saw before her not a towering knight, but a frail girl. And this girl was Barry's sister, the young warrior Amy. She would be the Duchess's tutor. She was also surprised when she realized her mistress already knew her teacher. Well, she honestly wanted to do the best for Sophia and chose a nimble girl as her teacher. If the poor maid had known the circumstances under which her mistress had met teacher Amy, she would have surely fainted with surprise. But she herself would never have guessed that this fragile girl was a teacher. The maid did everything in the best possible way. To find a self-defense instructor for her mistress, she contacted the knight's order and thought Sophia would be more comfortable training with a girl than with a rough man. Sophia was incredibly grateful to her maid. She wasn't always so good at perceiving such nuances, and always came to her aid in a timely manner. And now, too, she didn't let her down. The self-defense instructor introduced herself. Her name is Amy Jean. She's a teacher from the Knight's Order, and also the sister of Barry Jean, Prince Alexis's right-hand man. And she's at Sophia's disposal. And in her country, girls are forbidden from holding knighthood. So she's an unofficial member of the order, but she was trained by her brother and his friends, so there's no doubt about her professionalism. Perhaps Sophia doubts her knowledge after the incident when she was taken hostage, but the odds were too great back then. Raymond fielded more than a dozen of his best warriors against her. Sophia had only seen the girl once, and then she looked very exhausted. This is unsurprising since Amy was a hostage. Now she's in perfect shape and ready for work. The girl asked the Duchess not to worry. She was a good teacher and could teach her everything she knew. Within a week, she would be able to use basic self-defense techniques. Moreover, the girl was aware of the entire situation and said she would help Sophia in any way she could. Those who kidnapped her were the Duchess's direct enemies, so they would be her allies. Amy also revealed that Alexis is the leader of the Royal Knightly Order. Therefore, everyone in the organization is aware of Amy's kidnapping. They will also always come to her aid. During lessons, teacher Amy wasn't so sweet and gentle. She was a true knight and behaved as a true warrior should. So at first it was a bit difficult for Sophia. Amy explained this by saying that enemies were also on the alert. It was impossible to say for sure that Raymond and Samantha wouldn't exploit someone else's weakness, as they had with her brother and the butler Lauren. And the girl was 100% right. You have to be constantly on guard and trust no one but your team. You never know where trouble will come from. The young teacher understood perfectly well that she owed her life to this sweet lady. If not for her and Prince Alexis, she would no longer be alive, and her brother would remain a traitor forever. Lessons with Amy were very difficult. Sophia struggled with many things, and the teacher concluded that perhaps the Duchess simply lacked the aptitude. Even as a child, Duke Edelball wanted to teach her how to defend herself. But even then, the girl failed, and her parents abandoned the idea. Perhaps she was too feminine and delicate. But her teacher didn't give up. Amy insisted that even if one's abilities were very limited, one could always master the basics of self-defense. She'd just have to be tougher with her student. The young Duchess understood that she needed to make every effort to learn to protect herself and those close to her. She had to cope with this and not be a burden to Alexis and her father. A few days later, Alexis received a letter from Sophia. In it she wrote that she had discovered a spy on her father's estate. It turned out to be Laurent the butler, who had worked for the Duke for many years. Barry was happy for his friend. At first he thought Alexis was looking for a relationship, but now he saw the man's eyes light up as he read the girl's letter. Alexis was truly delighted. This girl is incredible. She's smart, brave, and very beautiful too. Perhaps she really will help him achieve the status of Crown Prince. It was at that moment that Alexis realized he missed Sophia. He told Barry it was time to end the war and return to the capital. They had a lot of work to do there. A few days later during training, a breathless maid appeared in the garden. But she brought wonderful news. The war was finally over, and Alexis's army was returning to the capital. Sophia smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. This time, it was all over very quickly. Last time this war took a whole month. Thank God, everything ended well. Or perhaps the military action ended much more quickly, because this time Prince Barry's right hand did not betray him, but on the contrary, helped him in everything. News of the war's end quickly spread throughout the empire. The people rejoiced and praised Prince Alexis. It was thanks to him that the war ended quickly and, most importantly, victoriously. On Sunday, citizens gathered in the capital's main square to greet the army of the first Prince Alexis as it returned home. Everyone wanted to thank the soldiers and congratulate them on their victory. How handsome the first prince was. He sat relaxed in the saddle, his face expressing absolute calm and self-confidence. Sophia couldn't take her eyes off him. To avoid attracting unnecessary public attention, Sophia didn't go out to the square to greet the prince, but watched the entire process from the window of her mansion. And only Ani could see how much she admired this man. For the first time, Sophia wanted to look her best as she was about to meet Alexis. She called her maid to help her choose the perfect outfit and style her hair. The girls rummaged through their closets and began choosing dresses. The celebration of victory and the return of the Imperial Army home would soon begin. They needed to prepare well. And then came the culminating moment. The celebration began. Sophia was a little late, so everyone's eyes were on her. She looked absolutely stunning. Sophia used to choose her outfit for special occasions so that it would perfectly match Samantha's, since they were always together. But at today's ball, everything was completely different. There was no need for that now, and it was clear Samantha was simply furious with her friend's image. Now everyone could see how different these girls were, both in appearance and personality. Sophia's younger brother Clifford ran up to her. He responded with a plethora of compliments and asked her to hurry lest they miss the troops' return to the palace. The boy was fascinated by war stories, and Prince Alexis, who led the Imperial Army, was his idol. Clifford couldn't miss such a spectacle. For some reason, Sophia remembered that last time, Samantha and Raymond hadn't spared her brother and had killed him in cold blood before her eyes. But now she would prevent that outcome. The emperor appeared in the hall, and everyone present fell silent and bowed. The emperor said that today they would thank the knights who had brought another victory to the empire. His Majesty then asked the commander of the army, First Prince Alexis, to approach the imperial throne. Alexis bowed calmly and approached the emperor. Only now did Sophia get a better look at the first prince. Thank God he wasn't injured. He remained confident and calm, so she breathed a sigh of relief and continued to observe what was happening. The emperor congratulated Alexis on his victory in yet another war and said he was ready to fulfill any wish the first prince might have. He deserved it, as this battle was of great importance to the state. Silence fell, everyone eager to hear Alexis's wish, and he voiced it. The prince wanted the emperor's permission to betroth him to Duke Edelbul's daughter, Miss Sophia. At that moment, it wasn't just the Duchess herself who was shocked. Everyone present simply gaped in astonishment. How could this be possible? After all, Sophia was planning to marry Raymond. You should have seen Raymond's face. He was ready to hear anything but such a request. It was at that moment that all his dastardly plans came crashing down. If the emperor agreed, he would never achieve the status of crown prince. The courtiers began whispering loudly. Why was Alexis doing this? Didn't he know Miss Sophia was preparing for her engagement to Prince Raymond? And why was he just standing in the corner silent? The emperor asked those present to remain silent for a moment, and then asked Alexis if he knew that the young duchess was soon to become engaged to Raymond. Alexis's handsome face seemed unmoved. He said he knew about the girl's engagement, but he couldn't do anything about it because he'd long been in love with Miss Sophia. To avoid spoiling the situation, Sophia ran up to the emperor and confirmed Alexis's words. She also said that she loved this young man very much. She approached the emperor even closer and began to explain that she couldn't live without Alexis. She begged the head of state to bless their engagement and subsequent wedding. The young men fell on their knees before the emperor in submission, but he asked them to rise and said that, as a reward, he would grant them his high blessing for the unions. At that very moment, a loud shout and applause rang out throughout the hall. It was a surprise for everyone, but it turned out very sweet. Alexis and Sophia are a very beautiful couple. The only one who wasn't happy about this event was Raymond. His face was distorted with anger and hatred for these two. How could His Majesty the Emperor do such a thing? He had always been the beloved son and had had great support. Sophia also secretly peeked at the traitor, and she was satisfied with the result. He didn't seem amused, and he certainly didn't expect this. He'd been outdone by a girl who always danced to someone else's tune. Sophia and Alexis bowed to the Emperor once again and thanked His Highness for the honor. Now everything would go according to their plan, and a worthy man would ascend to the post of Crown Prince. During all this commotion, no one noticed Samantha, who stood to the side. She too was shocked by the news, but now she would help Raymond become Crown Prince. A new game was beginning. Rumors were still circulating in the hall that Sophia was destined to be engaged to Raymond. But Duke Edelball approached the Emperor, bowed, and asked to speak. He told His Majesty that his daughter had long been in love with Prince Alexis, and rumors of an engagement to Raymond were just that, rumors, and he fully supported his daughter's choice. The Emperor has calmed down. The influential Duke has put everything in its place. He is not opposed to his daughter's wedding to his son, Alexis. Therefore, His Majesty sees no reason to deny the engagement. The Emperor then announced that a crown prince had not yet been chosen. All his children were equally entitled to the title, so he needed to think it over and make a serious decision. Raymond was furious that the Emperor was so open about the title of Crown Prince and that he hadn't yet decided who would inherit it. This meant his father had doubts about his candidacy, and the title could be given to Alexis. Alexis thanked His Majesty for the honor of having the opportunity to become Crown Prince, and said that he would try very hard to justify the trust of the Emperor and all the people of their country. He always tried to give everyone their due. However, while he acknowledged that the ally had played a significant role in the war, the problem was that most of the aristocracy did not support the second prince. Now that this issue has been publicly resolved, the Emperor can openly announce his second son as the contender for the title of Crown Prince, and it will be fair to everyone. Raymond began to panic, and he felt even more anger and hatred toward his brother and ex-fiancée. His chances of becoming Crown Prince were dwindling. He couldn't stand the public disgrace any longer and decided to leave the event. But that wasn't the end of it. He'd definitely come up with something to regain that title and get revenge on everyone for the humiliation. How long ago did that stupid girl uncover his plans? She'd never been interested in state affairs. She was a complete fool. But it turned out Raymond was deeply mistaken. Behind the mask of stupidity and naivety lay a keen intellect and insight. She had figured him out and knew exactly what he was up to. Raymond pounded his fists against the wall in rage, drawing blood from his hands. Samantha couldn't bear to watch, so she tried her best to calm the prince. They needed to figure out what to do next. The prince assumed this upstart had radically changed, and she probably figured out their secret affair. Therefore, Samantha is also at risk and must be on guard. Samantha didn't want to be embroiled in this unpleasant and especially public situation more than anything. She didn't sign up for this and has no intention of ruining her reputation. When things calmed down a bit, Sophia and Alexis decided to go out onto the balcony for a little privacy. Sophia said she'd been very worried about the prince's life and had expected him to return home safe and sound. Alexis smiled and said that the successful conclusion of the war was made possible solely thanks to the girl. If not for her, he would not have been able to return to the capital alive. Sophia blushed and replied that she couldn't act any other way. Injustice and meanness must be punished. Besides, Alexis deserved to become crown prince. The prince smiled, and it was so beautiful and pleasant that the girl was simply drowning in warm feelings. How lucky she was to be rid of the traitor Raymond and meet such a wonderful man. But the girl didn't have long to admire the prince's smile. Suddenly, he became serious and asked what they would do next, as the fight seemed to be only just beginning. Yes, it's very unlikely that the Edelball family will support the prince. Even if Alexis becomes crown prince, it's important to remember that he's not from a noble family, and that plays a significant role. The title of crown prince alone isn't enough. Alexis will have to face numerous obstacles from the nobility. He won't be accepted at first, so the young man will have to become much stronger to overcome all the challenges. Luckily, Alexis understood this perfectly well, so he was willing to listen to the advice of Duke Edelball and Sophia. They would certainly come up with a good plan of action. It seemed that after the kidnapping of his friend's sister, the prince had begun to trust the girl completely. This was a good sign, and Sophia was already considering her next steps. Fighting the system alone would be a foolish idea, so the girl decided they needed to find reliable allies to achieve their goal. Alexis has the support of the common people as well as the army. Duke Edelbal also says he will provide assistance of his own, but the prince also has plenty of enemies. No matter how you look at it, the games are very complex and brutal. Therefore, Alexis needs to gain as many followers as possible and secure the support of influential families. Alexin had no doubt that Sophia had already figured out how they would proceed. And she really had. They would help the prince's younger brother. Firstly, Alex won't become a crown prince simply by being engaged to the duke's daughter. The young man will also need outside support. That's what they'll be trying to get. And all sons of the emperor have the right to become heir and receive the title of crown prince. However, pedigree and useful connections are equally important for this. Thus, the first prince, Alexis, is the son of the ruler's mistress and is inferior to Raymond in many ways. Since the aristocracy places great importance on pedigree, it is precisely the second principle that enjoys their favor. While Sophia Edelbal's family may enjoy enormous influence in high society, it will clearly not be enough in this brutal and complex struggle. More help is needed. His engagement to a ducal girl gave Alexis just enough of a chance to secure the title, but to keep it, he'll have to make every effort. Secondly, Alexis lacks reliable and influential allies. Currently, the only aristocratic force on his side is the Edelbal family and the common people. But that's not enough. Therefore, the young people's first priority must be to find allies for Alexis. For starters, they need to reach out to those who would be willing to oppose Raymond. Alexis finally understood what his younger brother had to do with it. Besides the two of them, the emperor had another son, Bruno Auckland, but he always lived in the shadow of his older brothers. Prince Bruno led a rather modest and reclusive life. Consequently, the brothers interacted very little with each other. One might even say they largely didn't get along. Raymond was deeply jealous of his brother Alexis, but his only advantage was his birth. In all other respects, he was constantly losing to the second prince. That's why he plotted his assassination. Alexis may not be close with her second brother Bruno, but their relationship is still much warmer than hers with Raymond. And that's something to emphasize. It would be nice to see him. If things were that bad, Bruno wouldn't have investigated Alexis's death in the war and the murder of the entire Edelbal clan, so he's the one to turn to. Sophia I remembers Raymond unexpectedly appearing outside her prison cell. He couldn't hide his joy. Another serious obstacle in his path was removed. Then Sophia asked whom the vile traitor had killed this time. After all, her family and Alexis weren't everything. Without hiding his joy, Raymond replied that it was his brother Bruno, and he couldn't care less that Bruno was his younger brother. On his way to becoming crown prince, he eliminated absolutely all his opponents, even his brothers. Unlike Alexis, Bruno had no intention of becoming crown prince. He was interested in other things entirely. There was no need to kill him, but Raymond did it anyway. The traitor replied that as long as Bruno stayed out of politics, he'd let him live. But suddenly, Alexis's death struck his brother as suspicious, and he launched an investigation. He shouldn't have done that. Indeed, Bruno had always been known for his sharp intellect. He quickly realized something was wrong with the second prince's death and began to investigate the details. There were many inconsistencies in his death, and if this truth-seeker had gotten to the truth, Raymond would have been certain to fall into the emperor's disfavor, and the title of crown prince even more so. Therefore, there was only one solution: eliminate Bruno. Even then, Sophia realized this man was a true monster. He would even walk over the corpses of his brothers to achieve his goal and obtain the title of crown prince. But Raymond didn't care what Sophia thought. She would be the next one this lunatic would kill, and he wouldn't even hesitate, because the girl was just a simple fool, a pawn in a bigger game. Since Alexis has already survived the war and is still alive, Bruno needs to be rescued next. Right now, the boy needs their help. Otherwise, something irreparable could happen. Alexis really didn't see how he could help his brother. He had neither influence nor much support, but Sophia said they needed to meet with Bruno's mother. Arriving at the woman's estate in the evening, the young people saw that Bruno's mother was very ill. She was constantly in bed and required special care, but the woman was still very happy to see such guests. Even in her illness, she looked attractive. She was the second princess of a neighboring kingdom. It was unclear whether the woman was receiving the treatment she needed or whether Raymond had done his part here and was trying to eliminate her from this world. This needed to be sorted out immediately. While they were talking with the princess, someone entered the room. It was Bruno. He brought flowers for his mother. It seemed no one in the room expected to see the third prince there. Bruno didn't seem thrilled about his brother's visit, especially with his girlfriend or fiancée, but his mother was clearly pleased to have guests. She was tired of lying in bed all alone. Bruno didn't trust them. He didn't trust anyone that was the kind of person he was. He wasn't interested in palace intrigues. He was more concerned about his mother's health. Alexis said that since Bruno was absent from the ceremony, the prince decided to come in person and announce his engagement to Miss Sophia Edelball. This would also give them the opportunity to get to know each other better. The princess was clearly delighted with the news. She beamed and congratulated the young couple. They were a wonderful couple, both handsome and very sweet, and the woman sincerely wished them happiness. Bruno's behavior made it clear he valued his mother very much. Therefore, to gain his support, he needed to help the princess and get her back on her feet. Bruno Auckland was the third prince of the empire and the son of the princess of the Middle Kingdom, Raquel. The boy was radically different from his older brothers. He was barely mentioned, as if he had never existed. And perhaps not even everyone in the country knew that there were not two, but three crown princes. Bruno simply disliked unnecessary attention and always avoided it. To avoid participating in the struggle for the throne and the title of crown prince, he deliberately led a reclusive lifestyle and tried to avoid social events such as balls and receptions at the palace. His mother knew her son was very talented. Moreover, he came from a very influential royal family. He could easily have gained favor with the aristocracy, but he had no need for that. If Sophia and Alexis manage to convince the guy to side with them, they'll gain a very reliable ally. He's not stupid and understands the situation. Besides, he doesn't need to lie. He values honesty. When Alexis's misfortune befell him, the boy immediately began to doubt his death. He wasn't afraid to investigate the matter. Raymond has no power over Bruno, and that's his greatest asset. After chatting with the princess for a bit longer, the young couple wanted to speak with Bruno himself. He asked his mother to say goodbye to the guests, as she couldn't bear to overexert herself. The woman, of course, was against it. She wanted more communication, but her son assured her that it would be better this way. Her condition had indeed improved, but she was still very weak, and overexerting herself was harmful to a woman. The princess had to say goodbye to Alexis and Sophia. She was genuinely a little tired, so she asked the young men to come whenever it was convenient for them. She was always happy to see them. After everyone had left the sick woman's room, Bruno asked the guests point-blank about the real purpose of their visit. He seriously doubted they simply wanted to visit his mother. It was clear Bruno was far from stupid. He tried to appear friendly to disappoint his mother, but now he's showing his true colors. Although he tries to appear ordinary, he's anything but. Sophia had no choice. She didn't want to appear suspicious, but another opportunity might not present itself. So now she had to make the prince believe what she was about to say. Sophia informed Bruno that his mother had a maid who had worked for her longer than anyone else. This woman should be fired immediately, and the girl knew what she was talking about. The prince began to protest. He didn't understand what the guest was saying. This servant had been working for them since the moment their family arrived in the kingdom. He had never met a more devoted person, but the girl's next words gave the man pause. If he wanted to save his mother and himself, he would kick this woman out immediately. Sophia said she knew for certain that the maid had been slipping poisonous substances into the princess's food for a long time. They had a slow-acting effect, which was why the prince's mother hadn't recovered. If he doesn't trust the girl, he can secretly spy on the maid's actions. Every evening, she sings her a herbal infusion and then adds poison to it. Bruno grew nervous. This couldn't be true. His mother had been examined by the empire's best doctor, who had said she had a rare incurable disease. Therefore, the princess was simply being maintained with medication. Sophia couldn't call Bruno naive, but he'd clearly missed the point here. The doctor had long been in cahoots with Raymond and his mother's maid. If the guy doesn't believe her now and doesn't take any action, his mother will die within 6 months. But she won't die from illness, but from poisoning. If he doesn't listen to the girl now, he'll regret it later and be left without a loved one. So it's best to act now to save the princess's life and health. 6 months later, the maid, tormented by guilt, committed suicide, leaving only a note. In it, she explained that she had been threatened and had no other choice. Raymond had gotten away with it before, and no one knew what that note contained. The scoundrel simply destroyed it, just as he had destroyed the information that Bruno's mother's death was his doing. When Sophia was in prison, Raymond bragged about her a lot. The fact that he dealt not only with his brother Bruno, but also with his family, because unlike Alexis, his family is also very influential. The third prince listened attentively. He had no reason not to believe the young men. However, he warned them that if their accusations were unfounded, they wouldn't be able to get away with a simple, "It was a misunderstanding." Then Alexis said that if their joint plan failed, he would take full responsibility. He wasn't afraid of this and asked everyone to trust him. No one had ever complained that he might deceive anyone. This surprised both Bruno and Sophia, but they agreed, and Bruno offered to test the young people's theory since they'd already come this far. It seemed he agreed to help them, but then Bruno asked if everything turned out to be true. What would he owe these guys? After all, in this world, no one does anything for anyone for nothing. The exception is two lovers, but that wasn't their option. Sophia, of course, expected this question from a man. He's a strategist and accustomed to looking to the future. So she immediately replied that Bruno would become their reliable ally and would receive their absolute support and protection. The prince has likely already heard some rumors. The fact is, Sophia truly wants to make Alexis crown prince, but she lacks the support of influential people. Bruno said he'd heard about it. The prince couldn't attend the victory celebrations because he was caring for his mother, but he basically understood why Alexis wanted the engagement. He also knows that Sophia has started taking self-defense lessons, and he thinks it's a very good idea. It wouldn't hurt the future crown prince's fiancé, who needs to be constantly on guard against enemies. Wow, Bruno is well aware of even this. I wonder why he's keeping tabs on Sophia's life. Maybe he's just curious, but it's worth considering this man isn't as simple as he seems. His skills in information gathering are simply astounding. Only thanks to this in her past life was Sophia able to deduce Raymond's involvement in Alexis's strange death. Bruno is truly a unique individual, and that's a fact. He may have rejected the help of his influential maternal relatives, but that doesn't diminish the benefits of their union. Sophia frankly stated that her ducal family would support Alexis completely, but His Highness would still be surrounded by numerous enemies. Therefore, they needed someone they could trust implicitly. Sophia made it clear to Bruno that they needed him to fight Raymond. With his intelligence and insight, they could win these palace games. The prince understood that these people weren't trying to deceive him. They had no use for that. But what should he do? First, he needed to test them for vodka. Only then could he tell if it was true or not. He had nothing more to say to his guests now, so he asked them to return to the imperial palace. When he discovered the spy in his house, he would definitely inform them, and they would meet again. Alexis asked Sophia why she had chosen Bruno as her ally. She replied that he was the heir to the royal family of a neighboring state, and that he had very influential people behind him. The bond between him and his family cannot be severed, even if he wanted to. And if he agrees to sleep with them as an ally, it's entirely possible that his family will support Alexis as well. He's also very smart. His insight is the envy of any detective. He's not a public figure and always keeps a low profile. Raymond is also a bit afraid of him. Bruno isn't mired in gossip and intrigue. He still hides his true potential. But most importantly, he has no intention of siding with Raymond. Alexis looked at Sophia carefully. A logical question arose in his mind. Why was the girl so confident in what she was doing? She didn't even doubt her success, but the girl couldn't tell the truth that she'd already seen the future. She'd even been there. She'd seen her sister's death, his death in the war, and Bruno's murder. So now everything had to change. Alexis said they each have secrets, and he understands that Sophia has one too, but she doesn't have to tell him about them. He owes her his life. That's why he doesn't doubt her words or actions. The girl even felt a little awkward. She was essentially hiding almost the entire truth from him, but she promised the man she would definitely tell him everything someday. After arriving, Alexis walked Sophia to the carriage and sent her off to her parents' house. Yes, it's full of mysteries, but it's very captivating. Perhaps he even likes it. Still, Alexis hoped that this girl had been sent to him by fate itself. The man pulled a precious pendant from his inside pocket. A sad smile appeared on his face. He remembered his mother, She had been very kind and incredibly beautiful. It was no wonder the emperor himself had fallen in love with her. And then Alexis had come along, but then everything had gone wrong. All he had left of his beloved mother was a single pendant, and he kept it close to his heart. He would definitely keep his promise to his mother. He would not stray from his path, and she would be proud of him. Lately, Governess Anya always brought very good news. This morning was no exception. The girl brought a newspaper with the news into the Duchess's bedroom. Sophia immediately began reading and gasped in surprise. This couldn't be happening. The press had published an article claiming that a servant had attempted to poison the wife of the king of a neighboring state. The culprit had been caught by His Highness Alexis. Now the girl understood what Prince Bruno had said yesterday and what he had meant. He had said he needed to check the information about his mother's maid and would reveal the result tomorrow. And so tomorrow had arrived. This was simply wonderful news. She didn't doubt Bruno's insight for a second. Alexis's reputation was sure to soar. Now Sophia expected nothing less from the third prince. She called Anya back to her room and asked her to prepare a stunning outfit for her. She needed to visit a certain place. She was going to see the man who was spreading the right rumors. The girl picked up Alexis, and they went together to Bruno's family home. A few hours later, they were there. They needed to discuss their next steps. It seemed as if Bruno and his mother had been waiting for them for a long time. The boy sat by the woman's bed, as if on pins and needles, his face, as always, impassive. The woman was also worried. The ailing princess still couldn't believe that her faithful servant Emma, who had served in their house for many years, had turned out to be a vile traitor. How could she trust people after that? Bruno leaned sharply toward his mother. He understood that the woman absolutely mustn't worry. She was still very weak, so she required absolute rest, and such news would only upset her. Sophia looked at the poor woman with a sad smile. Experiencing betrayal from someone you trusted with absolutely everything, even your most intimate secrets, was a terrible blow. She understood perfectly. Just recently, the girl herself had encountered a similar situation. She confided in her friend Samantha and shared with her absolutely everything about her life. She understood the feelings of the sick princess very well. But tears alone won't help the grief. Bruno has already called the doctor, who examined his mother. Judging by the state of her body, she will fully return to normal once the poison leaves her body. Bruno was also shocked by the situation. Okay, the maid, but how could their family doctor be involved in such a scam? And how miraculously did Sophia find out about all this? The girl had expected this question, as it would naturally seem very suspicious on Bruno's part. But to avoid a direct answer, she said her family's resources were almost limitless. The third prince seemed satisfied with this answer. The influence of the powerful Edelball family is truly boundless. They are a veritable information network, and that really helps. Sophia, in turn, asked where Bruno had put the criminal. She couldn't be handed over to the imperial police, otherwise they might ruin the whole case. It was best to hide her for now. Bruno asked the girl not to take him for a fool. Naturally, he didn't tell anyone anything. But that's for now. He's waiting for the right opportunity, then she'll definitely be executed. Sophia assumed this woman must have valuable information since she was collaborating with Raymond. But as it turned out, the maid refused to talk, even though she had been caught red-handed. If she refuses to tell the whole truth, it means the person she's trying to protect is still alive. To get her to talk, she'll have to save that person too. Raymond has probably already read the news in the newspaper, and he's definitely furious. And if that's true, then there's a slim chance that the boy he stole from the maid is still alive. Sophia couldn't pass up the opportunity to speak with the traitorous servant. She asked Bruno for permission to see the woman. Perhaps she could learn something from her. Bruno wasn't opposed, but he decided to go down to the dungeon with Sophia and eavesdrop on her conversation with the maid. Not because he trusted the girl, he was simply curious. Sophia asked the woman not to worry, as she was completely safe. Those threatening her loved ones didn't know where she was, or even where she was. Sophia walked straight up to the maid and looked her in the eye. Then she said the woman could tell her the whole truth. She wasn't an enemy and wanted to help her so that she could do them a favor in return. The woman burst into tears and said her son had been kidnapped. To get her child back, she had to poison her mistress's food every day. That was the whole secret. But if she told anyone, her son would die. The girl heard Alexis's jaw clench in anger, and Bruno's expression changed. Everyone knew perfectly well whose dirty hands were at work. This was Raymond's favorite tactic. Everyone understood there was no time to waste. Sophia promised to save the maid's son, but in return, she had to promise to testify against Raymond in court. The poor woman wept and thanked the girl. She was deeply ashamed. She had served her mistress faithfully for many years, and if her son hadn't been kidnapped, it would have continued this way. But the woman was told it was too early to thank the young men. She needed to act quickly before Raymond and his dastardly allies noticed to save the child. Suddenly, a strange whistling sound was heard, like an arrow flying. And Alexis was right. It was a spear he managed to grab Sophia with lightning speed and throw her aside. He managed to save Sophia. The spear whistled right over their heads, but to the great regret of everyone present, they were unable to save the servant. The weapon struck her directly in the chest and pierced her body. How? How did this happen? Why? The woman is dead and there's no saving her, or maybe they weren't targeting Emma at all, but Sophia. The important thing is that their enemies are watching them trying to hide the truth. Sophia screamed for the door to be opened quickly. This woman had to be saved. She had to tell them where her child was. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to save the boy, just as they couldn't protect his mother. While Emma still had the strength to speak, she explained that her son was being held in a tower on the edge of town. There was a dungeon there, and she had gone there to make sure the boy was there and still alive. The woman couldn't say anything more. She simply begged him to save her son and take care of him. These were her last words, after which her heart stopped beating. Raymond, the vile coward and traitor, must pay for his crimes, and Sophia and the princes will ensure he suffers the harshest punishment. She promises this. Don't let him think he's scared Alexis and his team. He's gloating now, but it won't last long. We need to hurry to the outskirts of the city before this jerk has time to deal with the boy. Alexis reminded them that there was no time to waste. Emma was beyond help, but her son was still in danger, and only they could save him. So they had to hurry before Raymond got there first. How she hated that scoundrel Raymond. He was a real monster, not sparing the mother of a small child and keeping the boy himself in a dungeon. He would resort to any murder to achieve his goal. Bruno remembered that their maid had married a man from a neighboring town a few years ago. Indeed, they had a child, a boy of about 10. He sometimes came to their estate with Emma. Bruno also remembered that this woman's husband had been mysteriously murdered right before her eyes. She was left with only one son whom she loved madly. The man's killers were never found. Of course, it couldn't have been any other way. This lunatic leaves no trace. If Raymond didn't lie to her back in the prison cell, then to intimidate Emma, he did it to her husband. He showed this woman he wasn't joking around. He wanted her to believe he'd stop at nothing. Killing a child wouldn't be a problem for him. Bruno was smart but callous. He asked why they needed to save a criminal's child. What good would it do them? They didn't even know him, and he'd only met them a couple of times. Such words simply drove Sophia crazy. She screamed that the child was innocent, and they wouldn't be as inhuman as Raymond, so they would get the boy out of the dungeon. Alexis supported the girl. He also believed Emma had paid enough for her actions. Now she needed to take care of the child, who was left without both parents. The prince realized he'd spoken nonsense. Now they would think he was a cruel monster, so he apologized and said he wouldn't mind freeing the boy from captivity. Of course he was in. They won't just save an innocent soul. This boy will become a valuable witness when they prove Raymond's guilt. But the killer mustn't know the boy was saved. At the right moment, they will ask the boy to tell how Raymond forced his mother to poison the princess's food. And then the whole truth about his atrocities will come to light. A higher power has given her the chance to live the last 2 years again. And it's not just for nothing. She must correct her mistakes and ensure that the title of Crown Prince is filled by the right and worthy person. By evening, the young men had reached the outskirts of the city. The tower couldn't be mistaken for any other building, so they drove as close to it as they could. There was a guard stationed there. Sophia had the bitter experience of rescuing Amy from captivity. Back then, she was simply useless, unable to attack or defend herself. This time, things would be different. Having deceived and eliminated the guards, the young men cautiously opened the door into the tower. It was dark inside, but once their eyes adjusted and they could see something, they discovered it was empty. It was an ordinary bar, but it seemed like a simple cover to hide something important from prying eyes. Something no one should see. And Raymond had done his best. He was no fool. They found nothing, even though they searched every corner. But suddenly, Alexis remembered that before she died, Emma had told him there was a secret dungeon in the room. The boy was in there. It was a good thing Bruno went with them. He wandered around the room for a bit, then pushed aside the barrels near the buffet. Behind them was a secret door. This guy was a real detective. The young people were overjoyed. Without him, Alexis and Sophia probably wouldn't have managed. Opening the secret door, they saw a staircase leading down. That's where the dungeon was. Sophia was once again convinced that the prince was incredibly smart, but he hides it very well, pretending to be an ordinary, extraordinary guy. But his mental abilities are enviable. It was so dark in the dungeon that Sophia couldn't even see her hands. But they heard some sounds and movement in the corner. Looking closer, the young people saw a small silhouette. The girl immediately rushed toward where the child lay, but she stopped immediately as something sharp was pressed to her throat. It was a knife. Someone else was here besides the boy. The girl was seriously scared, but she kept her cool and decided not to flinch. She'd still need her life. The stranger ordered the men to drop their weapons and stand back. Then someone lit a torch, and it became clear the stranger wasn't alone. There was a whole group of killers. They had surrounded the young men. This time, Raymond was much better prepared. Alexis suggested they leave peacefully, otherwise they'd have to fight, which he does very well. But the strangers were also well prepared. Nothing personal, they were just doing their job. Even the genius Bruno couldn't figure out it was all a setup. They'd simply been lured into a trap. The strangers confirmed it and laughed. Their plan had worked perfectly. Sophia was the most upset of all. She believed that everything had happened because of her. Without thinking, she rushed down the stairs to quickly save the boy. For the first few minutes, she thought she'd become a burden to the boys again. But then, she remembered the words of her self-defense teacher, "Never give up." She knew how to defend herself. She gathered all her strength and remembered what Amy had taught her for a whole month. Then she twisted sharply and slammed her heel into the captor's leg with all her might. No one expected that. Amy taught that you can't defeat a woman by force. Therefore, you must rely on speed and surprise. This meant that Sophia had to disorient her opponent. She twisted her free arm and hit the guy in the solar plexus with her elbow as hard as she could. He hadn't thought the girl was capable of such a thing, so he wasn't expecting such a turn of events. The next second, Sophia delivered a crushing blow to the killer's jaw. He fell to the ground, seemingly no longer breathing. It looked so impressive, so everyone simply stood and watched. Alexis was the first to snap out of his stupor. He ran up to the girl and told her he was proud of her success. She hadn't expected that from herself either. It turned out the lessons with Amy hadn't been in vain, and then everyone turned their attention to Bruno and the group of assassins already lying on the ground. The third prince said they could calm down. He'd already done everything, he'd simply killed all those idiots. No one present even thought a man like Bruno could handle a sword. Today he surprised everyone. The guy himself said he was still far from a professional, but he knew a few things. Sophia's mouth dropped open in surprise. Yes, indeed. Talented people are talented in everything, but the boy replied that he preferred to use his brain instead of swinging a sword around. A small silhouette appeared from behind the barrels. A minute later, a small, exhausted boy emerged from behind the barrels. He was so terrified, he couldn't even speak. Sophia ran up to him and wanted to hug him. She told the child there was no need to be afraid of them. They had come to save him and would do him no harm. But the first thing the boy said was that he wanted his mother. There was a terrible pause, and it seemed to last forever. The girl spoke first. She said they would talk about Mom a little later. First, he had a lot to tell them. For starters, what was his name? The child said his name was Leo. We couldn't hear anything more from him as he lost consciousness. Luckily, the girl caught him in time. Those monsters were probably starving him. For that killer Raymond, this little one was just another pawn. The boy meant nothing to him. He locked the child in the basement and didn't even bother to leave him any food. Staying in the tower basement was no longer a good idea. Raymond's accomplices could descend upon them, and then they would be in trouble. They needed to leave immediately and bring the boy back to his senses. Alexis's expression changed noticeably. All these troubles are happening because of him. Everyone wants to help him, but it's not working out very well. People are starting to die, and it's becoming dangerous. The team decided that Emma's child should be left at Duke Ellebal's estate. He would be much safer there than at Prince Bruno's house. Besides, no one knew who saved him. It was late that night when the young couple arrived at Sophia's house. The boy had come to and was sleeping peacefully in Alexis's arms. They needed to put him to bed, so Sophia called her maid. But it turned out Ani hadn't come running just like that. She had news. It turned out that Sophia's friend, Mrs. Samantha, had been adopted by the ducal house of Boldega, and now she would become an influential figure in society. How could this be? As of today, she officially became part of this family renowned throughout the empire, and the news spread like wildfire throughout the country. The girl also handed her mistress an envelope and said that a stranger had brought a letter to their house and asked her to deliver it to Sophia. But Ani suspects it was a messenger from Samantha. Indeed, the letter was written by her former friend Samantha, who turned traitor. She informed her that she had been adopted and had become the fiancé of His Highness Raymond. But that's not all. It turns out they're throwing a big party to celebrate their engagement. There will be a lot of influential people there. Of course, Samantha would like Sophia to attend. How could this be? They outsmarted Alexis, and her fooled them like idiots. So the traitors somehow learned of Sophia's plans. That means someone is feeding them information. To gain reliable support in society, they managed to introduce Samantha into the ducal family. The Boldega family is second only to the Edelbald ducal family in terms of influence in the country. They pulled off a major scam. They lured Alexis and Sophia out of town, buying themselves enough time to set things up. They even managed to arrange Samantha's marriage to the ducal family. Sophia knew that Raymond and his mistress were dreaming of outwitting the Edelbald family, so they jumped at the chance to make a duchess out of Samantha. She'd been made a fool of. Until now, the Boldega family had been no match for hers. However, her father openly sided with Alexis, the son of a simple servant. And now, things aren't so clear-cut. Samantha has joined the Boldega family and also become Raymond's fiancée. This is bad because she will gain even more influence among the country's aristocracy, and this will complicate Sophia's task. Bruno studied the letter carefully Samantha had written about the date and time. The celebrations were to take place that evening at the imperial castle, so they wanted to kill two birds with one stone. Sophia and Raymond don't expect to attend this celebration of lies and deceit, but Sophia will surprise them. She'll come, and not alone, but bringing Alexis and Bruno. A truly grand celebration was held at the imperial palace. It was a true celebration of hypocrisy. Raymond and Samantha smiled falsely, sensing their near victory. All the guests listened to the first prince's mock speech as he announced that they had gathered today to announce the news that he and Samantha had become engaged today and would soon be getting married. Sophia watched from afar and realized that these traitors were only half-baked actors. All they wanted was to gain as much influence as possible from prominent families. Raymond also joyfully announced that from now on, his bride would be a part of the Boldega clan and an integral part of it. In other words, their influence in society would become much stronger. Raymond was simply drowning in the forced attention. He declared that he would never give up his bid for the title of Crown Prince and asked everyone present to support him. But at that moment, Alexis raised his hand, drawing everyone's attention. He said that in this title fight, the best man should win, and that certainly wasn't Raymond. As Sophia had expected, no one expected them to show up for this celebration. But Samantha pulled herself together and approached the young duchess. She forced a smile and greeted her friend. Samantha feigned apology, saying she'd been afraid to admit to her friend that she'd had feelings for Raymond for a long time, but she didn't want to do that and ruin their relationship, so she kept quiet. But Sophia decided to play along. She'd smile and play the fool, but she'd never forgive her for betraying her and for cavorting with Raymond behind her back. Sophia said she was very happy for her friend and that she had long suspected that Samantha and Raymond were secretly in love. Therefore, she wished happiness to her friend and the first prince. She didn't regret leaving Raymond one bit. He was a vile and utterly cruel man. Samantha would find out, but it would be too late. He would easily kill her too if that was what it took to secure his title. She has no use for a man who so easily betrays those close to him and plays with their lives for his own vile interests. She never loved him, and now she truly hates him. Sophia hugged Alexis and said that everything had fallen into place, that they had each found their true love and were happy. She too was now the bride of such a wonderful and respected prince. So by playing to the crowd, Sophia found herself in an advantageous position. She seemed to have overcome her compunction for her friend's happiness and given her her fiancé. Let Samantha explode with rage. These people will stop at nothing. They wouldn't even shy away from killing so many people to achieve their goal and secure the status of crown prince for Raymond. She will do everything to ensure Alexis ascends to the throne. They cannot allow a murderer and traitor to rule their empire. Their ruler must be an honest and courageous man who will protect its people. Bruno chimed in. He said why only Raymond and Samantha were playing. They were a pretty good team too, and it was time for them to play a little and get on their opponent's nerves. Duke Boldega also smiled wickedly. He hated the Edelball family, so he was pleased with this state of affairs. It would be to his advantage, and his family would become closer to the emperor and the authorities. His smile was just as vile. She would neither forgive nor forget how he had given false testimony against her family, accusing Duke Edelball of orchestrating a coup in the country. She remembers very well how he lied in court, saying that some suspicious people were constantly coming to the Edelball's estate and that they did not look like law-abiding citizens. And the most terrible thing was that the court believed this scoundrel and accused her honest father of all the sins of humanity. And then cruelly and without remorse, they murdered his entire family, including the servants. When Duke Edelball defended himself and insisted he had done nothing wrong, the vile Boldega presented the court with forged documents proving her father was a criminal. And these documents bore the Duke's signature. Her beloved and completely honest father was accused of terrible things such as slave trading, organizing riots, and other terrible atrocities that were beyond her imagination. It was then that Boldega approached the Duke in court and said that such a man should be punished to the full extent of the law, and that a worthy man would take his place, and it would be him. The court didn't listen to Duke Edelball. The townspeople's testimony was also ignored. Her father was found guilty of terrible crimes, and the bribed judge refused to hear any more evidence. Then her vile friend forced Sophia to watch her father publicly denounced and accused of crimes he had never committed. It was far beyond her strength. The Duke was declared a traitor. Then Sophia realized how easy it is to lose everything when your enemies decide to destroy your family. They openly mocked and rejoiced at how easily other people's lives could be destroyed with a single click. Samantha wasn't joking. She said they'd deal with Duke Edelball for now, but then it would be her turn. She'd make sure her friend died in mortal agony. Alexis pulled her out of her sad thoughts. He saw that she was upset by some memories, so he decided to ask what was going on and if she was okay. Now was not the time to be sad. He gently took the girl's hand and told her she shouldn't worry about these jerks. Since she was given a second chance to change everything, she would do it and he would help and support her in everything. The girl felt so at peace, but her peace was shattered again. And this time it was Bruno. He asked the lovers to leave their personal world and return to reality. There was something they needed to do. The young people were embarrassed. Was it really so obvious from the outside that they were simply drawn to each other, and that when they were together, the world became a little more beautiful and kinder? But there was nothing else to do. They had urgent matters to attend to. Besides being smart and skilled with a gun, Bruno also turned out to have a great sense of humor. He asked the lovebirds not to be shy. They were engaged after all, and so they had the right. Bruno decided to take his leave. He said he had urgent business to attend to. He couldn't reveal all the details yet, but they would all be pleasantly surprised in the end. Alexis and Sophia were already surprised. They thanked whatever higher powers had given them the chance to meet this man. There was no doubt that this time, too, the young man would come up with something interesting. Lately, every morning began with Ani bringing some news. And these days, the news wasn't always good. The girl handed the Duchess the morning newspaper again. Judging by her maid's appearance, the news was truly not good. Sophia picked up the newspaper and frankly was already dreading reading what had happened again and what they would have to extricate themselves from. But she still had to read it. But to the girl's great and pleasant surprise, the news was excellent. That's what Bruno meant when he said he had some urgent business. Before the young Duchess could savor the news, Ani rushed back into the room, but she wasn't alone. Alexis and Bruno stood behind her. The boys seemed to be in excellent spirits. Bruno greeted them and said he didn't want them to visit him anymore, so he decided to go to the capital and visit his friends. Of course, he didn't tell them he was coming, so the girl joked that she hadn't invited anyone over so early. But in reality, she was incredibly happy to see the boys each in their own way. she was especially delighted to see Alexis. The boys came to discuss the newspaper's latest news, specifically the article about the neighboring kingdom of Lyriquel, declaring its support for His Highness, Prince Alexis Bruno's mother, had arranged for this. The third prince smiled and said it hadn't been difficult at all. His mother had come to love Sophia and Alexis as if they were her own children and was willing to help them in any way she could. The boy said it wasn't his style to make such mistakes. He wasn't happy with the way the empire treated his mother, so he decided not to give up and wait for one of the princes to ascend to the throne. Then he would return to his native kingdom. He assessed his prospects in the event of one of his brothers winning the struggle for the imperial throne. And this clever fellow had already devised a whole plan. Bruno said he and his mother would support Alexis as long as necessary, and that he would not leave the empire until his brother's victory. But there was one condition. After Alexis became crown prince, he wanted to become prime minister. So it turned out that Bruno had his own interests in this struggle, but they didn't interfere with their plans. On the contrary, the young people were delighted by the news. The third prince was an excellent candidate. But there was one but. Although Bruno's mother had agreed to support Alexis, it would be a bit difficult. After all, the princess is a representative of a neighboring state, so she won't be able to play it straight. Whatever the situation, they're still on the rise. Now they're as strong as Raymond and have the equal support of influential families. With Lyriquel's support, they have a chance to continue fighting. How grateful Sophia was to Bruno and his mother for everything they had done for her and Alexis. The truth would finally prevail, and they would bring that scoundrel and murderer Raymond to justice. But Bruno didn't expect praise from anyone. He simply always loved honest people and stood for justice. That's why he decided to help his older brother achieve the status of crown prince of the empire. Raymond got rid of his younger brother because he'd discovered the truth about the death of the Edelbul family, as well as his older brother Alexis. And perhaps the scoundrel was simply afraid of Bruno. Having discussed all the details and ensured that their opponents had no way to come up with a counterattack so quickly, Bruno decided to take his leave. He wanted to visit his mother and spend some time with her. The third prince winked at the lovebirds and said he was giving them a wonderful opportunity to spend some time alone together. After all, they shouldn't forget that they were engaged. Let them discuss the wedding. And it's true. Lately, Sophia and Alexis have been busy trying to expose Raymond. They haven't really talked about themselves or their future plans. Alexis was especially handsome today. As always, he was more silent than vocal, but that suited the girl. She didn't like chatty people, and besides, she felt safe with this guy. She seemed to be obsessed with him because the guy asked if she was okay, as she was staring at him and saying nothing. Sophia apologized and sheepishly asked if Alexis wanted to take a walk in the garden. Of course he wanted it. One might even say he dreamed of such a moment. They would finally be able to be alone, learn something about each other, talk. After all, they were getting married soon after all. They went into the garden to the rose alley. It was truly beautiful there, but the young people seemed slightly uncomfortable. Their conversation faltered, and they were shy of each other. The girl decided to break the silence and asked if the prince remembered their first meeting. They were still children. Her father had taken her with him to the imperial palace, but she was bored listening to the state conversations and ran off to wander the grounds. So she climbed into the garden and then got lost among the flower beds. At first, she was afraid she wouldn't be found. Then Sophia encountered a boy who was also wandering among the rose bushes. The boy was incredibly handsome, but she would never have guessed he was a prince, the emperor's son. He greeted her and said he was there to pick a beautiful bouquet for his mother. Alexis paused and smiled slightly. Then he said he remembered the moment well and was very sorry they had met so late. He hadn't had a good time to tell her. It's so strange, so many years have passed, and yet history seems to be repeating itself. They're strolling among the rose bushes again, only this time as a bride and groom. It seems life is slowly getting better. Suddenly, the boy became sad, as if he'd remembered something unpleasant. The girl asked what had happened. Alexis said it had been difficult for him to be in the imperial palace back then. The girl apologized. She understood perfectly well how the emperor's illegitimate son was treated in the palace. His mother was a simple servant, so the boy was constantly ridiculed. He was a true outcast and constantly endured bullying from Raymond's people. He was about 9 years old at the time, and the girl couldn't comprehend how the boy managed to endure all of this. Sophia thought the boy was so strong because he'd been forged by circumstances since childhood, but that prevented him from enjoying simple things and pleasant moments. He's so young, but he smiles very rarely. That's what people do when they weren't loved as children. He needs to be helped somehow, and his life a little more fun. And the girl will definitely do that. Suddenly, Sophia asked why Alexis had decided to become crown prince. They had never discussed it. At first, she thought it was because of how he had been treated as a child. But there was another reason. This wasn't just a whim, a desire to show all these pompous figures that he too was worth something and capable of something. There was some secret behind it that Sophia needed to uncover. It seemed the boy had been expecting this question for a long time, because he answered right away. He said it was all because of his mother. He promised to get revenge no matter what. She and her mother lived in the foggy palace. It was the custom for inconvenient members of the imperial family to live there. It was a very harsh place. It was terribly cold inside, and just as cold inside the castle. Because of this cold, Alexis's mother was often ill, and her health was very poor. Alexis always worried about her and tried not to upset her over trifles. He had been used to being strong since childhood. The boy's mother was a very bright and kind woman. She wasn't worried about being sent far from the capital. She had her greatest treasure, her son. And he was close by, so he warmed her even in this cold land. The boy made sure the woman didn't get too cold, as she loved to walk outside and watch the snow fall. So Alexis always brought her a warm scarf and wrapped her up. They weren't receiving any money, and there were almost no servants, so the castle was in a deplorable state. Mother and son even had to hoard food and firewood to hold out longer. Alexis made sure his mother was always warm, so when the fireplace wasn't lit, he'd wrap her in warm blankets. She'd hug him and tell him stories and fairy tales. Perhaps because the boy felt responsible from a very early age, he was always serious and rarely smiled. It seemed he didn't even know how to joke, and didn't particularly like tous. All the emperor's children, both official and illegitimate, received the same education. This was the law of the land. Therefore, Alexis came to the imperial palace during his education. The boy had to be in the same class with his two brothers. Since they were still young, Alexis didn't feel any particular hatred from either Raymond or Bruno. But things got worse. Alexis was showing good results and doing much better in school than Raymond. And this really infuriated Raymond. He started bullying the boy and playing all sorts of nasty tricks on him. His mother was the only person who knew how hard it was for her son. But he was so strong that he would endure all the abuse, and when he grew up, he would prove himself worthy of becoming heir to the throne. As a child, Alexis didn't understand why Raymond hated him so much. After all, he was the emperor's legitimate son, lived in the palace, and had absolutely everything. He was no competition. He has a ton of servants who fulfill his every request. He eats the best food and sleeps in a warm bed. He doesn't have to worry about how to get through the next day, unlike Alexis. Those of royal blood have equal rights to the throne. But Alexis didn't have this privilege, as his mother was a commoner, so he was treated as an outsider. But Alexis's mother always told him that pedigree isn't the only factor in the fight for the throne. It's important to be a good person, to have served the state, and to love one's people. The boy understood that his life was in his own hands, so he studied diligently, then dedicated his life to the military and achieved considerable success. Moreover, he was beloved by all the people of the country. Raymond, however, had achieved absolutely nothing. He continued to live in the imperial palace, his anger toward the world growing steadily. He hated Alexis with all his soul. The mother was in great pain and hurt for her child. What hurt even more was that she couldn't help him in any way. She simply stood by, suffering and loving him with all her heart. The emperor turned out to be a weak man and a bad father. He pretended not to notice. He sent Bruno to the kingdom to be with his mother, sent Alexis to the northern castle, and kept only Raymond with him. He always remained in the shadows. That's why the boy never smiled. He was never happy. Never. He was hurt and offended. For himself, for his mother. And he wanted to restore justice. Whenever there was a celebration at the imperial palace, Alexis was the only one invited, and his mother was forgotten. Or perhaps they didn't want to see her, and the boy was always alone in such situations. Each such reception at the palace seemed like torture to Alexis. But he gritted his teeth, arrived, and endured the disdainful glances of those around him and the hateful gaze of his brother Raymond. One day, the boy was invited to a ball celebrating the birthday of the Empress Raymond's mother, and his mother sewed a suit for Alexis with her own hands. He looked simply irresistible in it. But Raymond, when he saw Alexis in such a stunning outfit, was deeply envious, for he, as the first prince, could never look so handsome and attractive. So he sent his brother away. But even this wasn't enough for the vile and pathetic prince. He found a bucket of dirty water and poured the entire contents over his brother. Thus he solved the problem, and no one would be more handsome at the celebration. He said that a commoner's son shouldn't even bother with such events. His place was at best in the stables, so let him go there. There was no point in being here. Since the boy couldn't go inside the imperial palace like that, he decided to stroll through the garden. There were a multitude of flowers there. There were no flowers in the misty palace. It was cold, so he'd pick a bouquet for his mother. That's when he saw a beautiful girl. She was also strolling through the garden, but seemed a little frightened. Alexis had never seen her there before, and the girl, seeing the boy, froze in surprise. The girl was surprised to see the boy covered in mud. His beautiful suit was completely dirty. It looked as if he'd been swimming in a swamp, but there wasn't even a puddle. What had happened to him? Then it became clear that someone had cruelly abused the boy. She pulled out a handkerchief and began wiping the stranger. He stood there stunned, unsure how to react in such a situation. When she cleaned the boy a little of the dirt, she discovered he was incredibly handsome, but very sad. His eyes seemed to have never seen joy, and his lips never smiled. The girl frankly told him straight to his face that he was very handsome. She had never seen such beautiful blue eyes before. But the boy looked in the mirror every day, but never thought about his own beauty. Sophia also said then that she had seen the first Prince Raymond, but his beauty would never compare to that of this handsome stranger. And this phrase stuck with the boy forever. No one had ever said such words to him. He was considered a second-class citizen, the son of a filthy commoner. In Raymond's opinion, the boy had no right to appear in the imperial palace at all. The girl asked his name, and when she heard his name was Alexis, she realized he was the emperor's illegitimate son and was very surprised. Why was the boy looking like that? She asked why the boy wasn't at the ball instead of wandering among the flowers. He replied that everyone avoided him because he wasn't a purebred heir. His mother was a common servant, so they treated him quite differently. What she heard outraged Sophia. How could she humiliate a child simply because his mother wasn't of royal blood? She was certain the boy was far superior to the first Prince Raymond in every way. The girl said that one must never give up under any circumstances. That's what her father taught her, but the boy replied that he wouldn't return to the palace. He'd rather pick the most beautiful bouquet for his mother. Sophia explained that she had come here with her father, Duke Edelbal. The emperor was holding a reception, but she was bored inside, unable to understand the conversation, so she ran off into the garden to admire the flowers. The girl said she too had previously thought she would become the family heir. But something happened that changed everything. Her parents had a son, her younger brother, and now he will be the heir. The boy said that even though he was the emperor's son, Alexis could never become heir and receive the title of crown prince because there was Prince Raymond. And no matter how hard Alexis tried, nothing would work. He said his mother is deeply distressed by the situation. It pains her to watch her child being abused, but her status prevents her from doing anything about it. The woman tried to explain that he was no worse than his brother. On the contrary, he was smart, striving to excel in his studies and practicing his military bearing. Soon, the empire would see him as worthy of being the heir. For his mother's sake, he's willing to continue to develop and improve so that she can smile more often and be proud of her son. His dream is to become crown prince and prove to everyone that he's the best. That distant day, the girl said she was certain Alexis would one day become the emperor of their country. He deserved it, that much was already clear. She knew that nasty Raymond and knew what she was talking about. Then Alexis simply smiled and replied that things weren't as simple as the girl thought. Raymond was very mean and wouldn't let him stand in his way. Besides, there was another crown prince, Bruno. They talked for a long time until they heard screams in the distance. It was the girl's father looking for his daughter. He was starting to get worried, so Sophia waved to the boy and disappeared behind the rose bushes. But the boy called out to her and said she might get lost here, so he would walk her to the palace entrance. It would be better that way, and she wouldn't waste time looking for a way out of the garden. Sophia wasn't used to this, but she saw and felt exactly what Alexis was feeling in this palace. Everyone looked at him with disdain, and not a single person supported him. She felt very sorry for the boy. It was very difficult to be an outcast in such high society. She couldn't understand why his father couldn't protect the child when he was just as much his son as Raymond. Alexis's appearance and ruined suit prevented him from moving forward. So he said goodbye to the girl, saying she had helped him a lot and motivated him to pursue his dream. For the first time, the boy was praised by someone other than his mother, and he was incredibly happy about it. This stranger gave him the strength and energy to keep fighting and show everyone what he was worth. When the boy returned to the castle in the north, his mother nearly fainted when she saw her son. What had happened to him? Someone must have beaten him and left him lying in a puddle. But why didn't he defend himself? The last thing Alexis wanted was to upset his mother and tell her the truth about what had happened to him. So he said he tripped and fell in the mud, then handed the woman the beautiful flowers. The woman hugged the child tightly. She knew she had raised her son well, and in the future, he would surely show all his enemies what he was capable of, and that he was worthy of being called Crown Prince. After everyone had calmed down, the son told his mother about the wonderful girl he had met in the imperial garden. He admired Sophia's beauty, intelligence, and most importantly, courage, and he longed to be like her. Well, his mother just joked about it, saying it was her boy's first time in love. But that's normal. At his age, everyone falls in love with beautiful, smart girls. As he scrubbed himself with soap in the bathroom and washed away the dirt, the boy thought his mother had misunderstood him. It wasn't love, but pure admiration. And maybe a little love. Alexis simply didn't know what love was. He'd never experienced it before, and he hadn't thought about it. And he hadn't really interacted with girls. But he wouldn't mind seeing Sophia again. At dinner, the boy noticed that his mother had placed his flowers on the table and kept glancing at them. He knew she was pleased, because it was very cold in their area and flowers didn't grow there. But suddenly, something terrible and incomprehensible happened. The woman felt ill and fell from her chair to the floor, losing consciousness. It all happened so quickly that the guy couldn't react. The doctor came, and as it later turned out, his mother was suffering from a fatal illness. She didn't tell her son this so as not to upset him, and tried to hide the truth for as long as possible. But everything comes to an end, and now Alexis sat by his mother's bed, unsure what to do next. The first thing he needed to do was get the woman back on her feet. The boy blamed the emperor for forgetting his mother's existence and sending her to the ends of the earth so as not to anger the official queen and her son, Raymond. He acted very meanly, but the mother thought otherwise. She told Alexis that when she was pregnant with him, the queen had wanted to kill her, but the emperor had found a way out and sent the woman away to the Mist Castle, thus saving her and her son. Their services were very limited, not because the emperor was stingy with the expense. On the contrary, the queen could have harmed the woman and child through strangers. Therefore, only reliable and trusted servants lived with them in the castle. His Majesty didn't visit them, not because he didn't want to or because he was ashamed. It was so the queen would think his heart had grown cold toward the maid and her child, and so she would give up trying to get rid of them. The boy knew absolutely nothing about this. He thought his father was a callous, emotionless man and very weak to boot, but it turned out he was trying his best to protect him and his mother. Before her death, the mother removed the beautiful pendant she always wore around her neck and handed it to her son. She said it was a gift from the emperor and that she was now leaving it to her son. This is the only gift she can leave her child. The pendant will always remind him of her and her love. May this stone always be with him now. The woman asked Alexis to never give up and to pursue his goal. She knows what her son is capable of and what he deserves. Therefore, she wants him to prove to everyone that he can achieve the status of crown prince. He too is the emperor's son, and his father loves him just as much as his other two sons. Let him just remember that he too has the right to become whoever he wants to be and live happily. And then Alexis said that his greatest dream was to show these arrogant aristocrats how wrong they were about him. He didn't want to leave Country A in the hands of people like them. He finally realized what he wanted in this life. He wanted to become king of this empire, and he believed he had the strength to achieve this goal. A little stranger opened his eyes and convinced him to move forward. These were exactly the words Alexis's mother wanted to hear. She warned him that it wouldn't be easy and that her son would have to endure a lot and work hard to achieve his dream. But she was confident that her son could do it. At her last moment before her death, the woman asked her son to promise her something. When he became emperor and placed the glittering crown on his head, let him remain himself. The son understood that his mother could never be brought back, but he promised the woman that he would never stray from the right path and would remain the way his mother had raised him. He swears and will not break his vow. The boy endured his mother's funeral very hard. He realized he was left completely alone in this world, with no one else to support him. Few people gathered, and the emperor never showed up. But the official queen did appear. She probably came to the funeral to personally verify that her rival had truly died. The woman couldn't hide her pleasure. She was angry that Alexis's mother had been allowed to live only because His Majesty had once taken a fancy to her. She was a real thorn in the queen's side. The woman explained her appearance in the northern castle by the fact that Alexis's mother was the emperor's official favorite, and therefore, as queen, she could not help but attend her funeral. As she left, the queen said that the only thing the child's mother could do right was to die while His Majesty was abroad on business. This evil and vengeful woman was a true witch. She didn't hesitate to utter such terrible words at the funeral and right in front of the deceased's own son. But the boy held on with all his might, Liz clutching her mother's pendant in her palm. He had to endure everything. He was strong, and he promised his mother that he would make everyone who had dragged her through the mud feel sorry for her. He truly won't allow such creatures to rule his country. He just needs to endure a little longer and reach adulthood. Only then can he officially assume his powers and begin the struggle for the status of crown prince. He will become emperor. It was on that day that Alex firmly decided that he would prove himself to everyone, especially to himself and his deceased mother, so that he could be called the emperor of this country in the future. And now, slowly but surely, he is moving toward his goal. Many years have passed, but he still keeps his mother's pendant close to his heart. It's a reminder of the woman who gave him life and the motivation to keep his promise to her. Sophia listened attentively to the boy's story and couldn't believe he had the strength to endure all the bullying and humiliation. How strong this man was. At first, the boy wanted to outshine everyone who so persistently tried to convince him that he was a second-class child of the emperor. So he tirelessly studied various sciences. Alexis excelled in absolutely everything. After some time, he was appointed commander of a knightly order. Being among strong and courageous knights gave him confidence. The knights, for their part, deeply respected their commander for his intelligence and integrity. They knew Alexis would protect them in any situation, so they trusted him implicitly. The boy won many battles and became a renowned military leader, earning the trust of the common people. He was loved by absolutely everyone except his father and brother Raymond. It was these factors that led Alexis to become the emperor of this country. He loves his people, and if necessary, will be able to protect them because he knows how. This young man had enough love and attention for everyone he cared for. Ordinary people never forgot his mother and confidently walked into the future. But at the same time, Alexis was honest with himself and with those around him. It was clear he now consciously wanted to achieve this result. It wasn't just to fulfill his late mother's wishes. He was now confidently moving toward his goal. Sophia was convinced the boy would achieve his goal, and she and his friends would definitely support him and help him on his way to his dream. He was very strong and could handle anything, even Raymond. The girl asked Alexis to show her his pendant closer. It was beautiful. The boy's mother knew a thing or two about jewelry. It was a wonderful jade stone of a stunning blue hue. The boy said the emperor had given his mother this piece of jewelry. He had personally chosen it and hung it around her neck. But that was a long time ago, at the beginning of their relationship, when he was still in love with her. But Sophia realized the emperor had never stopped loving his mother. He simply couldn't show his feelings. Being an emperor is difficult. You have to live by rules you don't accept or support. He kept Raymond close, but for some reason, he appointed Alexis as commander of the knightly order. He entrusted this young man with the safety of his country, and he was right in his choice. This means the emperor spent a long time observing his sons testing the waters and verifying whether Alexis could be entrusted with an important part of the state's work. After all, leading an army is not easy. The emperor then watched from afar as his son won the love of the knights and the respect of the common people. He won wars with ease, was an excellent strategist, and feared nothing. So Sophia told Alexis that she was certain the emperor had never stopped loving either his mother or him. It was simply the way things had worked out. The boy paused for a moment, but then replied that unfortunately he'd never felt a father's love, only a neutral attitude. But perhaps there was some truth to Sophia's words. Alexis recalled that his father seemed genuinely happy when he appointed him leader of the knightly order. And when Alexis made progress, he always praised him. The girl thought that, initially, she simply did not want to give Raymond the opportunity to become emperor, so she came to Alexis, the only person who could stand up to this monster. But now she realizes she made the right choice. She wants Alexis on the throne exclusively. He must become the next emperor. And now, Alexis is promising a second woman that he will definitely become crown prince and eventually emperor of the country. There's simply no turning back now. But the boy asked Sophia to always be by his side. He couldn't do anything without her, and not because he was weak. She had long since become his inspiration and support. Sophia, in turn, promised that she would never under any circumstances abandon Alexis and would do everything in her power to help him achieve his goal and punish the killers of her family. But from now on, she's not doing this just out of revenge against Raymond. She desperately wants the man who ascends to the throne to be worthy and to love his people. That's what she wants. Several days passed after their conversation. Raymond's silence was strange. He was probably plotting his next course of action, and soon they would hear bad news. Bruno arrived from a neighboring country. The boys realized they'd already missed each other. They needed to figure out what to do next, since things were still at a standstill. All hope lay in Bruno's analogical thinking, and the boy didn't disappoint. He noticed that, at the ball, Raymond was openly fawning over the aristocracy, trying to gain their attention. But it was clear that this murderer had nothing to offer these powerful and influential people except flattery. He wanted to use this method to ensure that the nobles, who had not yet made up their minds, would side with him. Bruno said that it would be very good if Duke Edelball, for his part, would also slowly influence society and put a spoke in the wheels of the stupid Raymond, ruining his reputation. It's clear this won't be enough, but soon the guys will play their trump card, and none of their dastardly opponents even suspect what it will be. Bruno believes that in their case, the common people, not pompous aristocrats, should take the central role. Therefore, their main support will be from simple and honest people. Until recently, power in the country was inherited according to a certain principle. It wasn't the best one. But now the situation has changed, as the two princes are laying claim to the highest title. In such cases, the dispute is resolved in a completely different way. The empire holds a vote in which absolutely every citizen of the country participates, and the result is not subject to discussion. This means that all people must cast their vote for one candidate or another, and it's clear that the common people in the empire far outnumber the aristocrats. Bruno has already tallied everything up and shared the results with his friends. Luckily, if the election takes place, Raymond simply has no chance of winning. The people will definitely choose Alexis. For ordinary workers and peasants, Alexis is a symbol of honesty and courage. He has won so many battles and is a fearless hero who led their empire to countless victories. Indeed, Alexis has earned incredible respect from the common people, which cannot be said about the scoundrel Raymond, who is afraid to even show his nose outside without security. Bruno asked his brother if he knew that people called him a fearless hero. But Alexis was so modest that he simply blushed and said he'd never heard that before. The third prince suggested not sitting idle in the estate, but going straight to the people and further winning their trust. They needed to get closer to the common people, and he had an excellent idea. So just an hour later, the guys entered the capital's most popular tavern. It was packed. An atmosphere of fun and carefreeness reigned. People were eating after work, chatting, and sharing news. At first, Sophia was shocked. She wasn't used to visiting such places. Everything here was strange and new to her. Aristocrats didn't spend time in taverns, much less girls. The owner offered the boys a free table and brought wine and snacks. The girl calmed down a bit and suggested they think about what to do next. But it turned out that the Rune had already thought of everything he pretended to be a stranger, and loudly asked Alexis if he was His Majesty the Prince, whom people called the fearless hero. This stunt immediately attracted the attention of every single patron in the establishment. People turned and looked at the table where Alexis was sitting. Everyone was eager to see the prince in person. Bruno, in turn, began to praise the commander of the knightly order, even more loudly, saying that it was time for him to take the crown prince's place. That would be the right and honest thing to do. Sophia was next. She shouted that it would be right not to allow the coward Raymond the imperial throne. After all, His Highness Alexis deserved it far more. The people would support him. Alexis loudly replied that there was one problem. For the emperor to make him heir to the throne, as many people as possible would need to vote for him, and the aristocrats, unfortunately, would choose Raymond. The tavern owner asked how they could vote to help the prince. He replied that they should write the future emperor's name on a piece of paper and drop it in a special box. The principle is very simple and clear. If there are fewer pieces of paper with Alexis's name on them, he will never become emperor, and His Majesty Raymond will rule the country. But the people in the tavern shouted that they would never allow such a turn of events. Many of those present had fought alongside Alexis on the battlefield, and thanks to him, survived. So now they were in his debt. One of the waitresses said that she would ask her entire village and all her relatives to come on election day and vote for Alexis, because her husband serves in a knightly order and respects his commander very much. Bruno's strategy was foolproof. They began their campaign with a small tavern, but rumors of the prince's presence spread like wildfire. What pleased Sophia most was that they were achieving success honestly, without killing or humiliating anyone as Raymond did. That was their trump card, and people would definitely support them. Bruno said it was too early to celebrate their success. They had a lot of work ahead, and the tavern alone wouldn't produce the desired results. They needed to spread the word further. It seemed Bruno still had a ton of cards up his sleeve. The boy said they'd need to stop by one more place that evening, and within an hour, they were standing in front of the Knightly Orders Inn. Sophia and Alexis didn't even ask why they were there. They completely trusted this smart and unpredictable guy, and knew that if he had something in mind, it would yield excellent results. Barry met the young men. He was surprised to see his boss and friend there. According to the latest information, Alexis was supposed to have business in the city, so why was he here now and not alone? Seeing the two princes and the young duchess before him, the young man froze in a bow. He had never seen the younger prince before, but Bruno turned out to be a very pleasant and cheerful young man. The third prince seemed confident and comfortable in any situation. He said he'd like to speak with the knights. He had some interesting information. He wants the knights to prove their love and loyalty to their leader, and at the right moment help him ascend to the throne and receive the title of crown prince, because he cannot cope alone. Bruno said that each of the knights had relatives and friends among the aristocracy. They should influence them and persuade them, if necessary, to support Prince Alexis rather than Raymond. The knights loved and respected their commander very much, and this was excellent news for them. They were all for seeing their commander on the imperial throne. His Highness Alexis was a true friend to them. There was never a time when the prince let them down or betrayed them in battle. Therefore, they will do everything to repay him with loyalty and truth. Someone suggested that people in the provinces have no idea what's going on in the capital and see absolutely no difference between Alexis and Raymond. Therefore, information needs to be brought to them. It was true. We need to explain to the ordinary people living far away in the provinces that only Alex can improve their living conditions and take care of their future. And those knights who do not have relatives in noble families simply need to convince their relatives and tell the whole truth about Prince Raymond and his vile methods of fighting for the emperor's throne. After talking with the knights, the boys were confident they would receive maximum support from them as well as from their families. So their decision to come here was definitely worth it. Bruno was very pleased with the work done. Now they have reliable support from the knights, the backing of some aristocrats, and they hope the people will support Alexis. The third prince turned out to be a wonderful man. How fortunate that they decided to go to his home one day and ask for his support. They were extremely fortunate to have him on their side. Bruno is a very powerful opponent, and it's best not to stand in his way. He's always kept a low profile, but that doesn't make him any less confident. And he had a score to settle with Raymond. He never interfered in anything, just like the first prince wanted. But then something happened, and now he wants to destroy Raymond just as much as Sophia does, so they can rest assured that he'll help them. But even the young duchess didn't know what Raymond's next move would be. His meanness knows no bounds, so one must always be on guard. No one knows what other cards he might have up his sleeve. Sophia had long been tormented by one question. Raymond's mother comes from an influential aristocratic family and behaves very provocatively. But for some reason, her relatives are not particularly supportive of her son's candidacy. Bruno was also surprised because it was strange. When you're looking for allies, you usually choose people you can trust. But perhaps trust isn't so strong in this family. Alexis said that's why he chooses only reliable and honest allies, who won't betray him at the first opportunity. He trusts Bruno and Sophia. Indeed, they had taken Duke Boldega as an ally, but no one in the country could say anything good about the man. He was a slippery creature who cared only for himself. Should the situation change, the Duke would readily switch to Alexis's side to save himself his reputation and his money. He would leave Raymond to face his problems alone. The same goes for Raymond's mother. The Queen came from a noble ducal family, but her brother holds rather moderate views and lacks great ambitions. He's very passive. Even when his sister became queen, he refused to engage in the game of power and authority. He continued to lead a quiet life, rarely appearing in public. Thus, Duke Raiden turned out to be a rather disinterested figure and far from the most influential member of their family. And Raymond probably doesn't see the need to use Raiden as an ally. Alexis also felt that the situation with the Queen's brother wasn't so simple. Something wasn't right. So the prince assigned his knights to the Duke. If Raymond tried to contact him, they'd know immediately. Late that evening, the girl returned to her estate. She was pleasantly surprised to find her maid and the little boy they had rescued from Raymond's clutches waiting for her. The boy was smiling for the first time. The boy was still a little shy, unaccustomed to such conditions, and besides, he was completely alone. His parents were dead. Annie tried her best to cheer Leo up and ease his pain. Sophia told the child that from now on, he would live in her house. Her maid would care for him as if he were her own son, and the Duchess had also arranged for tutors, and the boy would receive an education. In some ways, Sophia felt guilty about his mother's death, so she promised to give her son absolutely everything so that he would not feel like an unhappy orphan. The girl also wanted to raise the boy to be a real man, so she decided that sword-fighting lessons would be beneficial to him and would be very useful in adulthood. The boy was truly delighted by this news. He could only dream of this before. And now he and the Duchess will be taking self-defense lessons from the best knight Amy. She couldn't protect his mother when she needed to, so she knows how important it is to stand up for herself and her loved ones. Besides, Leo is a man, and she plans to take legal guardianship over him in the future. Life was in full swing in the Imperial Palace. Raymond seemed to be plotting something. He gathered the aristocrats for a dinner party, and everyone pretended to flatter him, claiming he would be the next crown prince. The fact that Duke Raiden had once again failed to appear for his beloved nephew's reception was noticed not only by Raymond, but by everyone present in the palace. He failed to pay his respects. Of course, the cowardly prince tried to hide his anger at being ignored by his uncle, but left alone, he nearly exploded with rage. Raymond remembered how 11 years ago, when he and Alexis studied together, the Queen Mother always scolded him for the fact that his half-brother studied much better. Such news always enraged the Queen, and she became very angry with Raymond, scolding him. He in turn came up with all sorts of excuses and tried to paint his brother in the worst possible light. Very often, the mother would lose her temper so much that she would beat her son, calling him a pathetic coward who was incapable of anything. He had royal blood in him, so why was he such a weakling? The woman couldn't understand how her son could lose to a half-breed like Alexis. After all, his mother was a simple servant. Why did Raymond keep embarrassing her in front of her family? When the Queen didn't like something, she would complain to her son. But she would also say she was doing it for her son's sake because he wasn't making any effort and was losing to Alexis. Sometimes Raymond would secretly peek at how Alexis and his mother were acting. It was clear that the woman loved her son madly, constantly praising and encouraging him, and she hugged him so tightly and sincerely. It was clear his rival was warm and comfortable in his mother's arms. He felt completely protected there, even without a noble pedigree. What Raymond saw simply blew his mind. Why could this vile homeless boy feel so happy? And he, the true son of the Emperor, was always miserable. The Queen never looked at her son with the love with which a simple servant looked at her child, whom everyone despised, and did not consider the crown prince. He probably needs to work harder at his studies and self-improvement, and then his mother will definitely notice and praise Raymond. He doesn't even dream that the queen will be able to hug him. That won't happen. Raymond knew full well that the suit Alexis wore to the queen's birthday party had been handmade for him by his mother. The second prince looked dazzling, and he decided to ruin his brother's outfit. The foolish and vile prince took it out on Alexis in this way. He took pleasure in humiliating and insulting his brother. He didn't play fair because he always lost. He doused Alexis from head to toe in mud and laughed right in the boy's face. Don't let him be such a handsome man. The suit was ruined. Let him go back to his foggy castle with his mommy. Raymond then said that Alexis's destiny was to serve him the first and rightful prince. Therefore, he must grovel before him on his knees and be afraid to raise his head. His lowly origins prevent him from rising from his knees and claiming not only the title of crown prince, but even the emperor's love. He is the complete opposite of Raymond. Pleased with himself, Raymond returned to the palace. He told his mother that he had gotten even with Alexis. But the woman didn't even listen. She scolded her son for being absent from the ball for so long. The woman was furious because Raymond was supposed to meet Duke Edelball's daughter at the ball. They had to secure this girl as a future bride. The ducal family is very influential in the country. Even members of royal blood listen to the duke's opinions. Therefore, they must get to know these people better. Without mincing words, the queen informed her son that he must do everything he could to win the heart of the young but influential girl and eventually marry her. Then the title of crown prince would be assured. He needs to make a real effort right now and get this girl's attention. Otherwise, Alexis will beat him to it here too. So she refuses to listen to excuses and asks her son to act, or he'll regret it. When the girl emerged from the imperial garden, she was immediately led into the hall and introduced to His Majesty Raymond. The boy immediately realized that this girl could help him achieve his goal. Sophia bowed to the prince and said she was very pleased to meet Raymond. She exuded strength and confidence. Raymond noticed it immediately because he himself was a weakling. And then the girl said something Raymond wasn't ready to hear. Sophia said the boy was nothing like his brother. She met the second prince in the garden, and he was very handsome. The queen could barely contain herself. And here, this lowly Alexis had gotten ahead of her son. How had he managed to meet the girl? This hadn't been in her plans. Everything was spiraling out of control. Sophia said the second prince had kindly helped her out of the garden after she'd gotten lost. Alexis seemed very kind and well-mannered, but a little sad. They had a good conversation. Raymond understood that without even doing anything, he had already angered his mother, and that she would take it out on him later. His brother had beaten him to it here too, and had met the young duchess first. Sophia's father was a wise man and understood why they had been summoned to the palace, but he didn't like the situation, so he took his daughter, said goodbye to the queen and her son, and went home. It seems the queen was in a good mood only on the day of the death and funeral of her rival Alexis's mother. Finally, the emperor's illegitimate son would be truly vulnerable. The woman she'd feared but refused to admit it, the one who'd constantly been a thorn in her side, was finally dead. It meant better days would come, and she and Raymond would be able to defeat that vile boy. Now the emperor's love and attention will be reserved for the queen alone. He will no longer dream of this lowly servant's name. She has finally won. The queen knew perfectly well that her marriage to the emperor was purely a benefit for their families. In fact, the sovereign had always loved this vile servant, and he loved her son as well, but he simply tried not to show it. The marriage to the princess of the kingdom of Lyriquel was purely for diplomatic purposes. There was no hint of love, and he treated the son from this marriage with complete neutrality. Besides, the boy never showed up at the palace. The current queen did indeed exist, but there were rumors that their family was not interested in increasing their influence in the country, and all they had from the principality was a title. They did not wield any particular power. Weak leaders had eroded the queen's family's former strength. Therefore, the queen rarely turned to her family for help and never asked for support for her son. Even the servants at the palace were whispering that the queen was elected only because it was convenient for the emperor at the time. He doesn't like her at all. That's why she's so furious. The woman took out all her anger and hatred on her son Raymond, who seemed pathetic and helpless to her, and on the servants. But that didn't make things any easier for her. Sometimes it got so enraged that she would beat her maids and then throw them out. She couldn't make any claims against the emperor. He simply wouldn't listen. She simply could not stand the fact that even the servants in the corners were discussing her life with the emperor, and any maid could confirm that the sovereign did not feel a drop of love for this woman. Raymond was still very young and didn't understand much. For example, that Alexis's mother had died, and for some reason everyone, even the palace servants, were feeling sorry for the queen, not her. Therefore, the woman's goal was to prove to absolutely everyone that only she and her son were the legitimate heirs to the throne, and Raymond must at all costs receive the title of Crown Prince. By any means necessary, even with the dire consequences, she will ensure that only her son can ascend the throne. She will help Raymond destroy Alexis. And if her son doesn't do what she asks, then he's a real weakling, and she shouldn't have given birth to him. He must become the sole heir to the throne, no matter what. From then on, the queen began grooming Raymond for the title of Crown Prince. She monitored his every move and punished him harshly for every misdeed. But this didn't make her son stronger. Quite the opposite, in fact. But despite all her efforts, the woman contracted an incurable disease and died. Only Raymond mourned her passing, but only for a short time. Until her last day, the queen continued to insist to her son that he must become crown prince at any cost. But she never once told her child that she loved him. Until her death, this woman saw Raymond only as an instrument with which she could fulfill her personal desires and achieve the love of the emperor. And Raymond had only one path left: to become crown prince. He knew no other way and didn't understand how to live in harmony with himself and the outside world. The prince learned only one lesson from his mother: he would force those who disobey him. That's what the queen always did. He would achieve victory on his own and destroy Alexis. He would have enough treachery and cunning to do so. As always, Ani came in this morning with fresh news. This time it wasn't bad, but there wasn't much good either. The country was preparing for the election of the crown prince. The girl also volunteered to help Prince Alexis. She has many acquaintances, and Ani will ask them all to come to the elections and vote for the most honest and courageous candidate, Prince Alexis. In the empire, most common people couldn't read properly, so Ani had to convey the necessary information accurately, and she was good at it. Spreading rumors is quite easy. The young couple also decided to host a reception. For this, Sophia wore her most beautiful dress. She was irresistible, and no one could take their eyes off the young duchess. Alexis was also irresistible. Blue suited him perfectly. His suit was perfect. He looked regal, and a modest smile occasionally flickered across his handsome face. The boy wasn't used to dressing so ostentatiously. His clothes were always modest and simple. But Sophia reminded him that he wasn't on the battlefield, but at a reception for important and influential guests. So clothes were important. The public's reaction to the prince and duchess's appearance in high society immediately shocked those present. They were so perfectly suited to each other, and only a blind man could have failed to notice the sparks of love between them. Sophia greeted the distinguished guests, smiling at each of them. She was truly delighted that so many influential people had accepted her and Alexis's invitation. The guests were also delighted that the young couple invited them to such an important reception. Everyone enjoyed themselves, drank delicious wine, had fun, and talked about the upcoming elections and voting. One of the dukes suggested that His Majesty Prince Alexis would have a difficult time in this race for the throne. They, as an aristocracy, prefer to follow the principle of blood inheritance. Alexis didn't quite understand why they treated him this way. He had imperial blood in his veins, too. It's just that his mother was from a common family. Why did everyone deny that fact? One of the nobles reminded him that his mother was a servant. But then Sophia decided to end the conversation. She approached the man, and in a calm tone, simply asked him to leave her house. The pompous nobleman said that was very rude of her, but the girl repeated her request once more, and said that if he had gone deaf from old age, she could repeat it louder. So that every guest in the room could hear, Sophia decided to set the record straight. She simply said that the people gathered here supported Alexis, and they didn't want to see Raymond's spies. Duke Edelbal entered the fray and reminded the vile spy that it was thanks to the Edelbal family that he had risen to such status. And besides, he hadn't yet repaid him all the money he had borrowed. The man hadn't expected such disgrace. He didn't know what to say or how to react to the Duke's words. He was truly mired in debt and Edelbal patiently forgave him and waited for his money. The first spy had been exposed, and that was only the beginning. There was no point in wasting any more time on such pathetic and corrupt people as this nobleman. They needed to move on. Sophia suggested they remember that they had a house full of guests, and it would be impolite to leave them unattended. So she returned to the hall and apologized to everyone present for the incident. The guests realized it was best not to play such pranks on the powerful Edelbal family. The Duke had helped so many of them rise from poverty to aristocratic status. Suddenly, the girl heard a painfully familiar voice. Someone greeted the guests and said they were having a lot of fun. Sophia turned and froze. Standing in the middle of the room was her former friend Samantha. Then, the traitor approached the Duchess and greeted her. She said they hadn't seen each other for a long time since Samantha's wedding to His Highness Prince Raymond. This vile woman also told the guests that she once came to visit the Duchess, but she asked her servants to show her the door. Friends don't do that. So why did Sophia do it? The girl didn't even bat an eyelid. She calmly replied that just anyone couldn't come to the Duke's house. Samantha should have given notice of her visit. Sophia reminded the girl that they had not been friends for a long time, so there was no need to come visit her to find out useful information for her lover, Raymond. But Samantha decided to play out a real tragedy in front of the guests. She started pretending to cry and lamenting how Sophia could treat her friend so cruelly. She truly loved hers. The Duchess smiled. How could they be friends if she was Alexis's fiancé and Samantha was the vile Raymond's? Both princes were fighting for the throne, so how could they be friends? They were also enemies. Samantha felt like she could burst with anger and shame. She hadn't expected this kind of behavior from Sophia, as she was used to the girl always being quiet and always agreeing with her friends' opinions. The Duchess called after her that Samantha needed to watch her behavior more. No one had invited her to this evening, and yet she just showed up. It was simply unseemly to behave that way. There was no doubt that Raymond had sent this deceitful and tactless girl here. Now he sat in his castle like a cowardly criminal, awaiting news from his mistress. Afterward, Sophia told the guests that she'd long suspected Raymond and Samantha were secretly dating behind her back. That's why she dumped the traitor and agreed to marry Alexis. He wouldn't betray her. The girl then asked the guests to ignore such unpleasant nuances. She thought to herself that she had managed to deal with two vile traitors that evening. Samantha was absolutely seething with anger. How long could this go on? Damn, Sophia had once again been one step ahead and gathered influential people. But now Samantha was no less important than her. Samantha was originally a princess. After the birth of her older brother, her parents were childless for a long time, but then she was born a long-awaited girl with beautiful hair. Her parents were doting on the girl born so late. Her brothers adored her too, and she lived with the Count's family, unaware of poverty, suffering, and betrayal. Her parents were already getting on in years, so they spoiled their daughter and denied her nothing. She was also a very sweet child, with a beautiful face and long fluffy hair. Her mother taught her good manners, and her father and older brother made sure the family knew no need either now or in the future. All was well until a certain point. One day her mother called her and told her that they would be meeting with very influential people that day. Therefore, the girl had to behave very well and not make her family embarrassed. A little girl came to visit with the adults. She was also incredibly beautiful, but unlike Samantha, she was very quiet and shy. This was her first encounter with Sophia. Samantha's mother, upon seeing the guests, immediately froze in a bow. The girl, however, remained standing straight, but her mother forced the girl to bow as well, saying that the guests were of a much higher status. They were dukes. It turns out, the Duchess had been experiencing health problems, and she and her daughter had come to this area to recuperate. They stayed at the Count's estate, who graciously welcomed them. Since Sophia's mother needed some rest after the journey, the owners suggested that her daughter play with their daughter Samantha. They're almost the same age, so they'd quickly get along. Samantha felt like a living toy. Then no one asked her if she wanted to play with a stranger, especially the daughter of Duke Edelbal. What could she possibly talk about with an aristocrat of such stature? But the girl turned out to be quite friendly. She immediately smiled and asked Samantha to address her informally, leaving the adults to worry about titles and social status. The girls got to talking. It turned out they were both 7 years old and had many common interests. Samantha offered to show her guest her house. Samantha, in turn, said they would become friends, But the friendship turned out to be strange. Now Samantha was expected to be like little Duchess Sophia. She was constantly criticized and asked to be more polite to the girl. This was a true punishment for the Count's daughter. She was accustomed to living in love and harmony with herself and her family. But after the arrival of the Duchess and her daughter, her family changed dramatically. The family used to dote on her, but now everything had changed. If the little Duchess didn't like something, they always scolded Samantha, and the girl now blamed Sophia for all her troubles. It's all because of her and her mother. Her own family stopped loving her because Sophia was smarter, had a better upbringing, and behaved more modestly and quietly than Samantha. Years passed. The girls grew up, but they didn't stop communicating. That's because Samantha no longer had friends. She didn't communicate with anyone except the Duchess. And the Duchess didn't mind spending time with her. When they appeared at social events, people would whisper and continue to compare the two women. They showered Sophia with the highest compliments, while Samantha was described as clingy, and the girl couldn't understand why high society treated her this way. After all, she was no worse than Sophia. They had simply become friends, and she didn't feel the need to make other friends. She simply wasn't as lucky as Sophia. After all, Samantha is an ordinary girl. Yes, she's the daughter of a wealthy count, but her friend is the heiress to a ducal family, and that's far higher than Samantha's title. All Samantha wanted was revenge for all the humiliation she'd suffered as Sophia's friend. The time would come when she too would achieve such a high position in society. Arriving at the imperial palace, Samantha shouted at Raymond and demanded that the prince deal with this insolent duchess as quickly as possible. She couldn't tolerate her any longer. The girl told how she appeared at a dinner party held in honor of Prince Alexis, and how Duchess Sophia humiliated her in front of everyone and kicked her out of the estate, telling her not to appear in her way again. But everything had to be done very carefully. Aristocrats must protect their reputations. If rumors spread that they were dating behind the Duchess's back, they would lose the trust of influential families. Influential families close to the emperor do not forgive lies and betrayal. Therefore, upon learning the full truth, they may switch sides and help Prince Alexis become crown prince. There are no young women in the royal family, and among the ducal families, the only one is Sophia. She is the same age as the other heirs and belongs to a noble family, so they need to start acting more radically. Otherwise, if Raymond doesn't ascend the throne, Samantha will never be able to surpass that upstart Duchess Sophia. Raymond was also furious. Everything was going wrong because of that arrogant Sophia. When did she become so strong and self-assured? Or was it Alexis who gave her that confidence? The prince tried to calm the girl down and said that their main battle was still ahead. There was no need to despair. If she was slapped, she should respond with a fist. They would do so just a little later. The party was over, and Sophia was very glad. She needed to rest. After all, Samantha had gotten on her nerves enough. But at least now, everyone knew who their real enemy was. Upon learning of Raymond and Samantha's affair, the aristocrats torn between the two sides will be freed of any doubts and will side with them and Alexis. After all, honesty is valued everywhere. But they couldn't sit in peace for long. Amy ran into the room. She was slightly irritated and frightened. Besides, it was too late for self-defense. Something must have happened. Sophia wasn't wrong. Something terrible had happened. Amy overheard the gossip spread by Raymond and Samantha. They were saying that Sophia had turned down Raymond's engagement because she was already secretly dating Alexis at the time. But how could that be? They painted the girl in a very bad light, as if she were cheating on her official fiancé and secretly being the lover of the second prince, Alexis. Even Amy was shocked. She understood perfectly well what this could mean for Alexis. He would lose his reputation and miss his only chance to become crown prince, and Sophia would be disgraced. The girl said rumors had even reached the Order of Knights, and all the women in the markets were whispering about it. If nothing was done, both Sophia and Alexis could suffer greatly. But how could this have happened? Of course it was that snake Samantha's doing. It couldn't have happened without her. She wants to avenge her disgrace at the party last night by any means necessary. Sophia shouted to her maid to immediately inform Master Alexis and Prince Bruno of what had happened. They had to act quickly to prevent rumors from spreading throughout the empire. Amy said she overheard two women discussing the matter at the market. Madame Sophia and Prince Raymond were engaged, but at the same time, she was secretly dating Prince Alexis. The rumor was based on the true story of Samantha and Raymond. They secretly dated and became lovers, while Sophia was preparing to marry Raymond. Although the emperor publicly gave his permission for her union with Alexis, and blessed them who would now believe that Sophia was not in a secret relationship with him while she was waiting for her engagement to Raymond, the girl was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't even notice the two princes and her maid entering the room. The boys were also already aware of the rumors, so they rushed in. This time, Sophia screwed up big time. It's her fault. She didn't think things through and said some stupid things to Samantha in front of strangers. This cut the traitor to the core, and she's taking revenge. Now she deeply regrets her actions, but she told the absolute truth. Raymond really was Samantha's lover, being Sophia's fiancé, but she can't prove it. There's no evidence. Alexis tried to reassure her. Yes, there was no direct evidence, but there was no need to despair and give up. Together, they would figure out how to get things back on track. Bruno was the only one who wasn't worried at all. He smiled as always and said things weren't as bad as they seemed. It turns out, Alexis had been keeping an eye on Samantha and Raymond's relationship this whole time. Yes, it turns out Alexis, when he heard the story about Raymond and Samantha, began secretly following them. He didn't tell anyone about it, but he figured it might come in handy. The prince's trusted people intercepted the correspondence between Raymond and Samantha, in which they confessed their feelings to each other, and in which they slandered Alexis and Sophia, calling them stupid and naive. Bruno smiled again and said there was no need to worry. They now had official proof, thanks to the second prince. Now they needed to go get it immediately. They took a carriage and headed downtown. After a while, the carriage stopped outside a large hotel. It was the perfect place for secret meetings. There was no fear of being caught. A hotel with such status hires staff who are always on the lookout for confidential information. Therefore, you can be sure that information will not leak beyond these walls. Alexis explained that the two traitors had long been using the hotel as a secret love nest. They surely knew the staff wouldn't spread rumors. That's all well and good, but how could Alexis know about these secret meetings if no one saw them, or saw them but wouldn't tell? But Bruno winked. The imperial family has informants everywhere. No matter how strict the rules for keeping confidential information, if the royal house needed it, it would leak through any barrier. Therefore, finding out a little more than was possible was not difficult. At the hotel, the right person was already waiting for them and led them to a back room where they could discuss everything privately. Bruno introduced his friends and said they could be trusted. Sophia noticed that Bruno had his own people at every turn. When a hotel employee greeted them in the room, coffee was already prepared on the table. It turned out they were already expected. The young man asked for some hot coffee and to wait for him for a few minutes. Then he returned with some kind of magazine. It was a list of guests who frequently rented rooms there for the night, but the guy said that visitors could register under a false name. After all, hotels are often used by dishonest people to carry out dirty dealings, make illegal purchases, and so on. But Bruno objected. He said the emperor had amended the law requiring hotel guests to enter only their official information into the registry for security and compliance. Bruno began to study the lists carefully. Within minutes, he saw Samantha's first and last name. It turned out she'd entered her details to avoid involving Raymond in this secret affair. Of course, the emperor's son can't spend the night in hotels. It would compromise his father. So Samantha took on that part of the job. There was no doubt she was meeting Raymond there. Why would two adults who own their own homes meet at night in a hotel? It's obvious, for romantic encounters that no one should know about. Having borrowed documents with Samantha's name and signature, the young couple left the hotel. There was no point in lingering here. Raymond and his mistress might show up. Meeting them here was out of the question. Finally, they have the evidence in hand, and now it will be easier for them to fight these traitors. They will open the people's eyes and expose these vile deceivers. Sophia still felt guilty about the situation, but the boys reassured her people would definitely side with them when they learned the truth about Raymond's affair with Samantha. The Duchess finally made it home. She was very tired. The whole situation had worn her out, so she didn't give up hope of simply resting and being alone with her thoughts. Everything was as usual at the estate. The servants were busy with their duties. But there was one odd thing: Leo didn't meet her. The boy ran out onto the porch every time he heard the sound of a carriage approaching. None of the maids had seen him since morning. Ani thought he was playing in his room, but the child wasn't there. Everything inside Sophia turned upside down, and fear settled in. The maid ran around the entire house, looking in every corner, but the boy was nowhere to be found. Only the guard at the gate said that a child had been seen leaving the estate, but he thought it was one of the servants' children. Based on the guard's description, it was definitely Leo Raymond is probably looking for the boy. After all, the child is a liability and a valuable witness in his brutal crimes. If this is Raymond's doing, every minute of the child's life could be his last. He'll do his best to make sure the boy simply disappears and no one ever hears about him again. She won't let these brutal killers take this innocent boy. He's just a child, and her job is to find him and protect him from people like Raymond and Samantha. These vile traitors know how to make their victims willingly fall into their clutches. But Leo had been at Sophia's estate the whole time, so how could they have lured him out? The gatekeeper said the child had left on his own. The girl asked the maid why the guard at the gate had let Leo through. After all, the entire estate staff knew that the ducal family was protecting the boy and that he was under constant surveillance. But the maid told me that their old gatekeeper had quit a week ago and a new man had been sent in his place. He probably hadn't realized that Leo wasn't allowed to leave the estate alone. This was also Sophia's oversight. The servants in the house were informed about Leo, but everyone else was unaware, and Raymond took advantage of this. He sent his spy to work for the Duke. While the girl was pondering this, Ani ran to the gate and fetched the new guard who had been on duty that morning. He turned out to be a young man. He was very scared and nervous. The gatekeeper said that the boy approached him that morning and asked him to draw him directions to the theater. The boy didn't know that allowing a child in alone was prohibited. At first, the young man was surprised by the boy's request, since as far as he knew, the theater wasn't holding performances at this time of year. But Leo said he wasn't planning to attend the performance. He simply needed to get to the theater. Annie ran up to them. She was holding a letter. She looked through Leo's room again and found the envelope containing the message. She was crying, so it must be bad news. Sophia opened the envelope and began reading. The letter informed him that Leo's mother was alive and that he could meet her near the theater. But he had to go there alone, otherwise nothing would happen. But how did the boy receive this letter? Mail arriving at the Duke's estate is carefully checked, as it could contain important papers for Sophia's father. One of the maids raised her hand. She'd been receiving mail yesterday morning. She'd delivered the important letters to the Duke's office, and one had Leo's name on it. She assumed it was a friend, so the maid, suspecting nothing untoward, delivered the envelope to the boy. She thought it would make the little one happy to know that his friends remembered him and were interested in how he was doing. Sophia was overcome with genuine rage. Why did problems arise out of nowhere? They were hiding this child from the world, trying to protect him, and yet he had left the estate unhindered. The girl also noticed her next flaw. She needed to select her servants more carefully and then give detailed instructions to each of them. Then many problems could be avoided. Before Sophia could even shout for the maid to contact Alexis, she heard her fiancé's familiar voice behind her. Bruno was standing next to him. Ani had gotten there before she could. The boys were alarmed by the news from the Duke's estate, so they decided not to waste time and arrived immediately. Within minutes, they were already talking with the gatekeeper who let the boy out. Sophia handed Alexis a letter in which the boy was told that his mother was waiting to meet him at the theater. There was no doubt about it. This message for Leo had been sent by that scoundrel Raymond. Bruno suggested not waiting and going to the imperial palace to see the first prince. The girl was all for it. They needed to find this child before Raymond did anything bad. Little Leo made his way to the theater without any trouble. He found it easily, as the security guard had drawn him a map. Although the building was large, no one, especially his mother, was there. The boy came even closer. Then he thought he must have misunderstood the message in the letter. His mother must be waiting for him inside the theater. So Leo resolutely pushed the door open and walked inside. It was dark inside, and the boy didn't immediately recognize who was standing before him. But the silhouette was unfamiliar. It definitely wasn't his mother, but maybe this woman would take him to the right place. The stranger greeted him and introduced herself as a friend of Leo's mother, then said his mother was feeling a little ill. She asked Samantha to meet her son and take him to her. The boy apologized but refused to go with the woman. His mother had no friends from aristocratic society. She only made friends with commoners. Besides, he knew all of his mother's friends. The woman became flustered. then laughed and called the boy a naive fool. Then a man appeared behind her, someone Leo remembered very well. He had killed his father. Raymond smiled wryly. The little fellow shouldn't have mentioned it out loud. He could have saved his life, but he talks too much and knows too much that should be forgotten. Apparently, his good memory will ruin him. The boy realized he wouldn't get out of here alive this time, and he deeply regretted not asking Madame Sophia to take him to the theater. Better yet, he would have been better off not reading that letter at all. Leo closed his eyes and prepared for death. But suddenly, he heard the clash of swords. Leo decided to see what was happening and simply froze in joy. Mr. Alexis was fighting Raymond, and Leo knew exactly who would win. And then the boy heard the familiar voice of Madame Sophia. He didn't exactly notice where she was and simply ran toward the sound. A few seconds later, he found himself in the Duchess's warm and secure embrace. Leo knew for sure that if Prince Alexis was here, he wouldn't let anyone harm him or Madame Sophia. He wielded a sword better than anyone in the world, and Raymond couldn't compare. Sophia examined the boy to make sure he was okay, and that the deranged prince hadn't hurt him. Then she asked why Leo had acted so recklessly, and whether he hadn't suspected anything. The boy burst into tears. Of course, the letter seemed suspicious to him, and there was no signature, but the desire to see his mother, even for a moment, was stronger than common sense. Sophia herself almost cried. How could she tell this sweet little angel the truth about his mother? It would break her heart. She wouldn't do it for now. She needed to wait a while for things to calm down. But then the boy looked at the girl and said there was no need to remain silent about the truth. He had long since realized that this terrible man had killed not only his father, but also his beloved mother. The Duchess wept with the child. She apologized for hiding the bitter truth from him, but she said his mother had thought of Leo until her last moment and had asked Sophia to take care of him. Sophia didn't see Samantha approach them. She'd been watching her and the child, but then decided to reveal herself. She clapped her hands and said she wasn't impressed by the tragedy at the children's theater. Raymond approached Samantha. They began to laugh together at each other's misfortune. It seemed they were no longer even trying to hide their terrible crimes, and it was simply disgusting. Raymond said there was no point in hiding, since the Duchess was already aware of all their tricks. But Alexis asked the killers to stop and cease such vile conversations in front of the child. Raymond laughed, but the second prince wasn't amused. He was tired of remaining silent and internalizing all the mockery, so now he would show this vile criminal his place. Raymond was furious. He knew he couldn't defeat his brother in a sword fight. No one had ever defeated the leader of the Knights' Order. He'd spent his whole life playing with Alexis like a toy, and now he'd come up with something too. He won't allow the offspring of some concubine to even think about taking the imperial throne. Raymond is the one with the right blood, and he will rightfully take that place. The next minute, Raymond fell from a crushing blow from Alexis. The second prince never forgave anyone for insulting his late mother, especially someone as rotten as the first prince. He'll be able to defend his mother's good name. She truly was the most honest woman in the world, and raised her son the same way, and Raymond has no right to even utter her name. But the next moment, Alexis tried to calm down. He couldn't kill the scoundrel now. His guilt hadn't yet been proven, so everyone would think the knight's leader had killed an innocent prince. Yes, he couldn't kill his brother, but that was for now. But no one forbade him from wounding a murderer, so Alexis slashed his sword across the traitor's cheek. Raymond hadn't expected that and nearly died of fear. Samantha also feared for her lover's life. She ran to him and confirmed the wound was not life-threatening, but Alexis warned that only Raymond bore the killer's name. Raymond had lost again. He had no further use for himself here, as all his threats against Alexis seemed childish and unaccountable. He felt himself becoming pathetic and losing control. He was leaving, despite Samantha's cries, that the situation couldn't be left like this, and Alexis needed to be taught a lesson. He couldn't do it. He was weak and pathetic, and all he could do was simply leave. Fortunately, this time too, everything ended well. But all of this is only thanks to Alexis and Bruno. Without them, not only Leo, but Sophia herself would not have survived. The boy was so exhausted that he fell asleep right in the carriage on the way home. He constantly apologized for leaving home without permission, but the girl understood that his love for his mother was more important to him. His mother is gone, and the boy knows it. So Sophia must replace Emma for him and do everything possible to ensure Leo doesn't feel deprived of love or out of place on her estate. Parental love is important to everyone at any age, especially to young children. She remembered her past life. When she witnessed the murder of her mother, father, and brother, she nearly lost her mind. The girl promised herself that this boy would live a happy life, and she would ensure it. She would protect him from all harm, for the child had already seen enough evil and betrayal. The next morning, Bruno showed up at the Duke's house again. He was in a good mood and said that Sophia and Alexis's relationship wasn't progressing. They urgently needed to go on a date. Sophia found the prince's words strange. These were tense times and no time for dates. It wasn't that she didn't want one. She really did. But she should expect an attack from Raymond, not think about dates. But Bruno had a completely different opinion. Nothing terrible would happen in the one day he and Alexis could devote to each other, and afterward, they would return to the fight for the throne with renewed vigor. The third prince reminded them that even though their marriage was considered a sham, they needed some alone time. He was sure the young people had plenty to talk about. He would spend some time with Leo. Maybe there was some logic to Bruno's words. After all, once they defeat Raymond, they'll have to officially become husband and wife, so they need to spend more time together. Right now, their relationship is strictly business. But things can't go on like this. There won't be a better opportunity to talk to each other anytime soon, so they should take advantage of it. Bruno also reminded them that they should marry for love, not convenience or mutual support. People notice everything, and if they act like business partners in public, no one will believe their feelings. The third prince was absolutely right about their marriage. It's important to remember that building a healthy relationship is far more important than simply entering into a marriage of convenience for the sake of achieving a common goal. But what does Alexis himself think about this? Has Bruno talked to him? They've shared many moments, but it's hard to say the young people talked much about their feelings. Sophia had gone on many dates with Raymond, but never before had she been so anxious and prepared as she was now. This meant she simply didn't have true feelings for the first prince. The girl had long ago noticed that the second prince had been on her mind for a long time. She thought about him, constantly recalling all their meetings and moments they'd shared. And that must mean something. She can't remember the last time she'd chosen her dress and accessories for a date so carefully. Her look shouldn't be too over the top, but she didn't want to look too casual either. Of course, you'll have to ask your beloved and faithful maid for help. And as always, she won't let you down, doing everything perfectly, and the girl will look as good as a princess on her date. The preparations took about an hour. Ani was in her element. It was a matter of honor for her to ensure her mistress looked her best. It was obvious that Sophia was nervous. Exactly. At the appointed time, the front door opened and Prince Alexis appeared. To say he was irresistible would be an understatement. The Duchess was momentarily speechless. The prince greeted her, complimented Sophia, and invited her to follow him to the carriage. Were they going somewhere? The girl had thought their date would take place at most in the ducal garden among the blooming roses. Their thoughts were jumbled, so an uncomfortable silence reigned in the carriage. No one knew how to start a conversation. The girl was shy and afraid of appearing foolish or naive. The prince also remained silent, afraid of saying anything unnecessary. A short time later, the carriage stopped in the city center in front of the opera house. Sophia had hoped they would be surrounded by people and would be able to calm down a bit, but it turned out they would have a private box. The young couple had settled in, but the performance hadn't yet begun. Alexis asked the girl if she often visited such places and if she enjoyed theatrical productions. She replied that she had visited this place in the past whenever she could. After her rebirth, she never visited this place. She simply had neither the time nor the opportunity. All her strength and energy were focused on fighting and exacting revenge on Raymond for her family. For some reason, the conversation turned to Raymond again. Alexis asked when Sophia realized he'd betrayed her. She replied that she'd been naive until almost the engagement and believed her fiancé and her friend were just friends. She lived her life through rose-colored glasses. But if she'd been paying closer attention, it wouldn't have been hard to spot such obvious betrayal. She simply grew up in a normal family and was used to trusting people.